I have just finished Marineford. I'm sitting here as a new, emotionally crumpled man, and I can confidently say this arc completely broke me down. It didn't just make me cry, it rearranged how I see this story, these characters, and honestly, Luffy himself. Marineford isn't just hype, it's not just spectacle. It feels like the moment the adventure I've been watching for 6 months walked into a meat grinder and came out as a tragedy. Where do I even begin with the emotional whiplash? We spend hundreds of episodes building up this bond between Luffy and Ace. Little flashbacks, little mentions, that quiet promise that one day the brothers will stand side by side again. Then, we get impelled down. The desperation, the injuries, the insanity of that prison break, all to reach this one point. Luffy crashing into Marineford from the sky like a human meteor, screaming for his brother in front of the entire world. And it works. Against every insane obstacle, every admiral, every warlord, every impossible wall, he actually does it. Luffy reaches the execution platform. The chains break, the fire is gone, and Ace is finally free. That single shot of them standing together on that platform after everything, in my opinion, that might be one of the most powerful payoff moments in the entire series so far. I felt my soul leave my body. I was cheering, I was shaking, I was like, Oda, you madman, you actually pulled it off. And then, it's ripped away. Instantly. No time to breathe, no time to process, just pure narrative cruelty. That joy turns into horror so fast that my brain genuinely could not keep up. One second I'm celebrating the reunion we've been waiting for since Alabasta, and the next second I'm watching the most emotionally destructive sequence One Piece has ever thrown at me. Like, that is insane. Marineford as a whole might be the most intense and flat-out entertaining anime war I've ever seen, but what makes it stick is how completely it destroys Luffy. Physically, mentally, psychologically, this arc takes him apart piece by piece in front of us, and that's what this video is going to be, a full breakdown of that reunion, this war, and the way it reframes the entire world of One Piece. The Marines, the Warlords, Whitebeard, Inherited Sin, Chosen Family, all of it. But real quick, there is one specific choice Ace makes in the middle of all this chaos that I cannot stop thinking about. It's the moment that, in my head, changes Luffy forever. We'll get there. To understand it though, we have to start from the instant Luffy crashes into Marineford and declares war on the world. Title card Chaos. Welcome to Marineford. So as soon as Luffy crashes down and basically screams at the entire planet that he's here for Ace, we hard cut into this music-only title card Chaos. No voice, no commentary, just drums and strings going absolutely crazy while the screen drowns in Marineford. We open on the waves. These aren't calm, pretty One Piece ocean shots anymore, right? The water is slamming against the walls of Marineford, spray flying up like shrapnel, and the camera is whipping around the bay while the percussion just keeps building and building. You can almost feel your chest vibrating with every hit. Then, smash cut to the execution platform, Ace in chains. The camera pushes in, the drums drop out for half a second, and we only hear this low, ominous rumble under the music as the nooses and spears frame him like a gravestone. Nothing could have prepared me for how much this one image would carry the weight of the whole arc. On the next beat, Whitebeard's ship erupts out of the sea. It doesn't just sail in, it rises like a sea monster, water exploding everywhere, and the soundtrack kicks back in with these huge war drums. Every cannon blast we see syncs perfectly with the music, like the entire bay is playing percussion. Then Luffy, midair, mouth wide open, screaming Ace's name. The audio doesn't even use his voice here in my head. It's just the echo of that scream layered into the instruments. Like his desperation becomes part of the soundtrack. This arc completely broke me down, and we're not even back to me talking yet. Right as the chaos hits its peak, the channel title just slams onto the screen. It doesn't fade in all gentle, it smashes down with this metallic impact that sounds like a cannon firing, while Whitebeard cracks the sky behind it. You hear that quake sound tearing through everything, lightning, splintering glass, and my logo is literally shaking like it's about to fall apart. Like, that is insane for a title card. We rapid fire through faces, Sengoku glaring, Garp looking tired and broken, the three admirals lined up like a wall, warlords smirking in every direction, Ace gritting his teeth in chains, Luffy still falling toward the battlefield. It's this insane visual reminder that every corner of the story is colliding right here. In my opinion, you feel the scale before you even process it. Pattern interrupt. The music suddenly cuts to near silence. All that's left on screen is the title, Luffy and Ace Reunited. No sound, just one long, uncomfortable beat where you and I are forced to sit in that promise, knowing what's coming, or thinking you know what's coming. With all of that said, let's get into how this war actually begins, from the very first cannon shot to Whitebeard's final words. What this video covers, and why it had to be split. So real quick, before we dive face first into the chaos, I need to be super clear about what this video actually covers, because Marineford is insane and nothing could have prepared me for how big this thing really is. This video is Marineford proper. That means we're starting with Luffy crashing down from the sky with the Impel Down Suicide Squad, we're staying locked in on the war itself, we're going through the reunion with Ace, Whitebeard's last stand, and we're ending on the immediate emotional fallout on that battlefield. No cuts to Amazon Lily, no full breakdown of Luffy's spiral after, none of the training build yet, just the war, blow by blow, while it's still fresh and raw. When I first sat down to record my thoughts, I wildly underestimated how much this arc had broken me. I hit stop on the recording and looked at the file length and just laughed, because there was no universe where I was going to make you sit through a 3-hour ramble from an emotionally crumpled man. Between Marineford and post-war, the raw notes were so crazy long that the only way to keep this watchable was to split them. In my opinion, trying to cram Luffy's breakdown and the Straw Hat's situation into this same video would have just flattened the impact of both. So here's how this one is structured. First, I'm going to frame Marineford at a high level. Why it feels like One Piece's endgame moment, how the Marines, Warlords, Whitebeard, and even the idea of justice all collide here, and why this specific battlefield is where the story stops feeling like a simple adventure. Then, we're going to walk through the arc chronologically, almost live reaction style. Luffy's arrival, Sengoku's announcements, Ace on the platform, the Admiral's flexing, Oars Jr.'s charge, the reunion, Akainu's madness, Whitebeard's final quake, Shanks ending the war. After that, I'll slow down and talk thematically about Luffy, Ace, and the world itself. That last chunk is where I really want to dig into Ace's guilt as Roger's son, Whitebeard as the peak of found family, and how this war exposes the Marine propaganda we've been watching build in the background. Why does the world cheer this execution while we feel sick? Why does one choice from Ace change Luffy forever? Why does this arc completely break him down, rip him up and spit him back out as someone who can't just keep sailing like nothing happened? Now, because I know a lot of you are waiting for the real emotional collapse, the post-war video is coming very soon, probably next week. That's where I'll cover Luffy's actual breakdown, the context of the Straw Hats being scattered, how Jinbe steps in, and how all of that funnels into the decision to train and the time skip. Think of this one as the shock, and post-war as the aftermath you can't look away from. And once both are out, I really want to do a full Paramount War Saga retrospective, from Sabaody to post-war, looking back with the full picture. How did all these arcs secretly build to this one war? How different does Sabaody feel after you've watched Marineford burn? With all of that said, let's get into the war itself and start from the moment Luffy hits that frozen bay. Thank you for dragging me into this pain. And as Luffy hits that frozen bay, I have to pause the chaos for a second and just say this. You all did this to me in the best way, but also, why? From like Arlong Park, from Alabasta, from Eni's lobby, people have been in my comments like, you're not ready for Marineford, nothing could have prepared you. Enjoy the laughs now. Do you realize how insane it is to be watching a goofy rubber pirate and also feel this constant dread countdown in the background? It became this running joke, but also this weird pressure cooker. Every time Luffy had a wholesome moment with Ace in flashbacks, I'd see you all foreshadowing in the comments, just quietly sharpening the emotional knife. And now that I'm here, in the middle of this war, I get it. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and spat me back out as a new, emotionally crumpled man who cries at the sight of a Vivre card. Real quick, I want to pull back from the battlefield and talk about something I've never really said out loud. Doing long-form, blind review breakdowns of a single arc like this is something I've wanted to try for years. Not just surface level, that fight was cool, but actually sitting in the story, living with these characters, tracking every little build and payoff. I just never had the right series. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt big enough to justify this level of emotional dissection. Then, One Piece happened, and suddenly, I'm 6 months deep, hundreds of episodes in, and Marineford shows up like, oh, you wanted scale? You wanted impact? Here, have your entire soul rearranged. In my opinion, this is the first time an anime has made me feel like I'm watching my own sanity get put through a war arc, and I really appreciate how not alone you've made that feel. The comments of people rewatching alongside me, dropping theories without spoiling, timestamping their own first reactions to certain moments, it's crazy. I'll finish an episode where Luffy is just breaking psychologically, open the comments, and see 10 of you like, yeah, I had to pause here too. That shared experience makes covering something this heavy feel way less isolating. So, soft ask, but since we're already crying together, if you've been enjoying these deep dives, if you want to see me survive post-war and then do that full Paramount War retrospective, consider dropping a like and subscribing. Nothing could have prepared me for how many of you would actually show up for this kind of long-form breakdown, and it genuinely helps push the channel to more people who might want to suffer with us. Right now, we're creeping up on that 50K sub milestone, and I don't see it as my number. I see it as our little Marineford support group headcount. Can we hit 50K before I emotionally recover from this arc? Probably not, but imagine looking back after post-war, after the time skip, and saying, yeah, we built all of this starting right here, in the middle of this insane war. With all of that said, let's get back into the chaos and talk about what happens when Luffy finally reaches Ace. How do you even describe Marineford? Where do I even begin with Marineford? Like, how do you look at this absolute wall of chaos and emotion and try to put it into one clean description without your brain just blue screening on the spot? In my opinion, the closest thing I can compare it to is watching Avengers Endgame if every single person who walks through those portals had been built up for 500 episodes instead of 20 movies. Except, even that doesn't really cover it because Endgame still feels safe. You kind of know the guardrails are there. Marineford feels like somebody ripped the guardrails off, pushed the car down the hill and said, okay, let's see who survives. Nothing could have prepared me for how brutal that feels while you're actually watching it. Real quick, just think about who is actually here. You've got the full Marine machine, Sengoku, Garp, the Admirals, all the Vice Admirals, the Pacifistas, the entire Navy presence stacked in one fortress. Then you layer in the warlords, each one their own little disaster. Mihawk testing the waters, Doflamingo being a chaos gremlin, Kuma, Moria, Hancock. On the other side, you've got Whitebeard's entire fleet. All these commanders we've only heard whispers about, plus the random allied crews who owe him everything. Then, Luffy skydrops in with the Impel Down escapees, this walking prison break highlight reel. Over all of that, you've got the world government watching, and the shadow of the Yonko system just hanging over every decision. That is insane. What blows my mind is how casually One Piece earns this. The story spends over 500 episodes just building and building, introducing these factions, giving you tiny pieces of their ideology and power, letting names like Whitebeard and Admiral and Warlord live in your head as myths. And then Marineford is Oda, basically saying, cool, we're putting all of them in one cramped arena and no one is walking out clean. It's not just big powerhouses clashing for spectacle, it's every political thread, every reputation, every grudge, all tied to one execution platform. And this is where the One Piece is too long argument just evaporates for me, because this arc completely broke me down emotionally precisely because it was long, because I knew who these characters were, what they'd lost, or what they were willing to risk. If you cut the journey in half, you cut the impact in half. You don't feel the weight of Whitebeard yelling as a father, or Garp shaking, or Luffy collapsing in the same way without that investment. Marineford is what happens when a long story cashes every check it's been quietly writing for years. And the crazy part? That's just the setup for what Ace and Luffy actually go through on the ground. The war that rewires the whole world. And the wild thing is, that setup isn't just about emotions between brothers. It's the entire world quietly loading a gun and pointing it at Marineford. When you zoom out, this isn't a rescue arc. It's the visible tip of the craziest iceberg in One Piece so far. You've got admirals, warlords, Yonko, the world government, even revolutionaries lurking in the background, and they're all being tested in the same arena. It's like Oda took the whole power hierarchy chart, crumpled it up, and threw it into one bay. Watching, I kept asking, who actually runs this world? Is it Sengoku on that platform, the Gorosei in their room, Whitebeard with his flag, or the fear of Roger's blood itself? Marineford is where the Marines stop feeling like the good guys in cool coats and start feeling like a terrifying political machine. The way they stage Ace's execution as a global broadcast, with commentators, with the crowd, with those massive screens, it's not just punishment, it's propaganda. They're not killing Ace because he's dangerous right now. They're killing the idea of Ace, the symbol, the son of the Pirate King, and nothing could have prepared me for how casual they are about weaponizing that fear. In my opinion, this is where justice in One Piece becomes a brand. You see civilians cheering, kids waving little marine flags, and you know they've been fed this story their whole lives. Meanwhile, we, after Enies Lobby and Sabayoti, know the darker side. Buster calls, slavery, celestial dragons. So when they call this absolute justice, it hits like a threat, not a promise. Like, that is insane. Then Whitebeard shows up and the entire narrative tilts. I went into this thinking he was just big scary Yonko #1, a monster pirate to topple. But the war reveals him as this stabilizing father figure whose very existence keeps the balance from collapsing. Other pirates don't invade territories because his mark is there. The seas don't completely spiral because everyone's afraid of what happens if they poke the old man. When he moves, the world literally quakes. But the crazy part is realizing how much chaos explodes when he's gone. Real quick, when you compare this to Enies Lobby or Sabayoti, those arcs suddenly feel like skirmishes. Enies Lobby was the Straw Hats kicking one door in. Sabayoti was the system flicking them away like flies. Marineford is the system going all in, turning war into a public spectacle, inviting the whole planet to watch justice crush a single pirate on live TV. And once you see what that machine does to Ace and Whitebeard, it becomes impossible to look at Luffy's dream, or this simple idea of pirates versus marines, the same way again. Because if this is what the world does to one brother, what happens when Luffy himself steps onto that stage? With all of that said, let's get into what actually happens when Luffy finally reaches Ace. Crash landing, from impel down to instant war. So when I say Luffy finally reaches Ace, the crazy part is he doesn't actually reach anything yet. We smash cut from Impel Down's lowest floor, from Luffy literally foaming at the mouth and collapsing after losing Bon Clay, to this man being loaded into a cannon like emotional cargo and fired at the next trauma. Nothing could have prepared me for how little time he gets to breathe. Impel Down ends with Luffy barely alive. He's poisoned, bandaged, his body shaking, his brain still replaying Bon Clay's goodbye. That elevator door closes, Bon is singing, and I'm sitting there like, okay, maybe we get a recovery episode, a quiet boat ride, some time to process? Nope. The story looks at this emotionally crumpled man and says, Sky, now. In my opinion, the decision to go 0 to 100 instantly is insane in the best way. 1 second they're shooting up through the ocean currents, the next second they literally explode out of the sky above Marineford, falling in this chaotic rain of prisoners, smoke, and debris. No buildup, no grand entrance theme for Luffy, just, surprise, here's your half-dead protagonist dropped into the most important war in the world, and Marineford is already set. That's what really hit me. The execution platform is built, Ace is chained up, the 3 admirals are just casually sitting there like final bosses waiting for the cutscene to end. The warlords are lined up, the marines fill every inch of the plaza, and out past the frozen bay. Whitebeard is on his way. Luffy is separated from his crew, he has no real plan, and he's crashing into a battlefield that's been prepared for days. Real quick, can we talk about how unfair that feels? Luffy just crawled out of a prison arc that this arc completely broke me down with, and now he's supposed to fight admirals? How is he even standing? How is this the same kid who was getting folded by Magellan like 20 minutes ago in storytime? I kept asking myself, what does a Whitebeard versus world government war even look like when your main character is already running on fumes? And if you're watching the anime, the music and visuals sell that chaos so hard. The sirens blaring, the camera whipping around the bay, the marines shouting, the prisoners screaming as they fall, the sudden cut to Sengoku barking orders while Luffy is still midair. You feel like you got dropped in with him. No preparation, no strategy, just raw panic and hype colliding. Like, that is insane storytelling confidence. They trust that you've spent 500 episodes with these characters in this world, so they can just throw you into the middle of the war and let the visuals, the noise, and the sheer density of faces tell you everything. You're overwhelmed on purpose, and this is all before Whitebeard even makes his real entrance, before Luffy and Ace actually lay eyes on each other again. Because once the dust from that crash landing settles, that's when the war truly starts to move around Luffy himself. The world is watching, global reaction montage. And while all of that chaos is starting to orbit around Luffy, the story does something that honestly caught me off guard. It cuts away, it rips us out of the screaming, the explosions, the admirals, and suddenly we're in some tiny bar, or a random town square, or a ship way out on some quiet sea, just watching a screen. Nothing could have prepared me for how powerful those cutaways would feel. You've got whole islands literally stopping their day because the broadcast of Ace's execution comes on. Bartenders freeze mid-pour, kids who should be in school are glued to this giant snail TV, pirate crews out in the middle of nowhere turn down their music and just stare. The war isn't just happening at Marineford anymore, it's invading living rooms. And that's when it really hit me. This isn't just a pirate problem, this is a world event. The Marines are staging this like the Super Bowl of public executions, and everybody is forced to tune in. In my opinion, cutting away from the battlefield like that makes Marineford feel so much bigger, because you see the impact in real time. You're not just watching Luffy and Whitebeard fight for Ace, you're watching an entire planet being told, this is justice. Real quick, the variety of reactions is insane. Some towns are cheering, literally raising drinks to the idea that Whitebeard's age is ending. You've got people chanting the Marine's name like it's some hype sports moment. Then you cut to other places where people look horrified, hands over their mouths, or just silently holding each other. And then the scariest ones to me, the people who are just numb. They're eating, they're working, they glance up at a man about to die and then go right back to it. Like, that is insane world building. It tells you exactly how desensitized this world is to violence and justice as spectacle. We've heard about bounties, execution plazas, Eni's lobby, all of that, but this is the first time the story really shows you the average civilian's relationship to it. Some of them genuinely believe pirates are monsters and the Marines are heroes. Some clearly don't buy it but are too afraid to say anything, and some have just accepted that the government killing people on live TV is normal. This arc completely broke me down, not just with the big emotional moments, but with stuff like this. Because suddenly, Marineford stops feeling like a shonen war and starts feeling like history class. You know those grainy clips of world-changing events where everyone remembers where they were when it happened? That's what this is for One Piece. We're literally watching the day the balance of power shifts, the day the great pirate era starts to crack, and every cutaway is another witness. And the crazy part is, while the world is watching Ace, they're also watching Luffy crash that stage, which is where things get even more personal. Ace on the platform, a symbol, not just a brother. So, while the world is watching this insane war unfold, the camera keeps cutting back to that platform. And Ace is just there, chained up, head bowed, Sengoku towering behind him in that massive coat, Garp sitting right next to him like a stone statue. Visually, it feels like a painting the history books are going to reprint forever. You look at it once and you instantly feel, this is already decided. He's not fighting, he's not struggling, he's not yelling, he's small. That's what hit me. Marineford is chaos, explosions, giants, admirals throwing out god-tier powers, and then up above all of it is this tiny, still silhouette with his hands in sea stone cuffs. It screams helpless, it screams inevitable, and the crazy part is, they want it to look like that. This is a stage, this is theater, because Ace isn't just some pirate they caught, he's Gall D. Rogers' son. When Sengoku drops that bomb, you can feel the whole story recontextualized in real time. Of course, the world government is obsessed with this execution being public. It's not about one guy who joined Whitebeard. It's about sending a message that even the blood of the Pirate King can be chained, displayed, and erased. Like, that is insane as a political move. In my opinion, Ace's bloodline is the most dangerous thing about him to them. His existence says Roger's will didn't die. His son is out here making his own name, finding his own family, wearing that D in his middle name like a quiet threat. If that becomes a symbol, if people rally around that, what happens to their great pirate era deterrent narrative? Nothing could have prepared me for how cold that realization felt while I was watching. And then, you look at Ace himself. His body language is so calm, it almost feels wrong. Head down, eyes shadowed, occasionally glancing at Garp with this mix of guilt and affection. He's resigned, but not empty. You can tell he's thinking. He's listening to the chaos below, and he hates that people are dying for him. You feel that conflict. Does he even want to be saved at this cost? Is he allowed to be happy if Luffy crawls out of hell itself to reach him? That contrast is brutal. Below, Luffy literally breaking his body. Impel down, escapees throwing themselves into a meat grinder, Whitebeard reshaping the ocean. Above, Ace still, almost peaceful, like he's already accepted his role in this performance of justice. This arc completely broke me down because you realize Luffy isn't just storming a fortress, he's trying to hijack a global broadcast and rewrite the meaning of this execution in real time. He's going against a narrative that's been carefully built for decades. And real quick, When those two stories finally collide, when Luffy actually reaches that platform and they touch and hug for the first time in this arc, all of that symbolic weight, all of that history just slams into that single moment. I really appreciate good build, but I was not ready for how fast Marineford was going to rip that feeling away once it finally gave it to me. Luffy versus a battlefield. Built to break him. And the wild part is, the second that hug happens, the story basically goes, cool, you enjoyed that? Time to throw this kid into a blender. Because when you zoom out for even half a second, Luffy has absolutely no business being here. He is a rookie captain, already wrecked from Impel Down, crashing headfirst into a war that's literally built for monsters. Admirals, warlords, vice admirals, Whitebeard's commanders, random legends who've been fighting longer than Luffy's been alive. And then, this rubber guy who just sprinted through hell shows up wheezing in the middle of it. Like, that is insane. Nothing could have prepared me for how aggressively Marineford is designed to break him. The environment itself feels like a trap more than a battlefield. You've got the frozen ocean turning into this jagged arena of death, the towering walls that rise up and lock everyone in, the encircling marine ships closing like a noose, and then, just when you think that's enough, a whole army of pacifistas walks in like they're spawning in a raid. It's not just, oh, this is a cool war map. It's a funnel. It's built to crush any rescue attempt long before it ever gets close to Ace. And Luffy is the one idiot, the one hero who still tries to run straight through the meat grinder. In my opinion, this is where the arc stops feeling like a fun adventure and starts feeling like psychological horror. Every time the camera cuts back to Luffy, he's more torn up, more bloody, more exhausted. He's clashing with admirals, warlords, giant vice admirals, Mihawk literally testing the potential of the next generation. And you can feel that he's not supposed to be on this screen with these characters yet. It's like watching a level 30 character sprint into a level 100 zone because his brother is on the other side. Every punch Luffy throws in Marineford feels like it's coming from someone at the end of their rope. He's panting, his arms are shaking, he's getting skewered, frozen, blasted, and he just keeps getting back up in this really uncomfortable way. I'm not watching thinking, wow, hype shonen power up. I'm watching thinking, how much more can this kid's body and brain actually take? This arc completely broke me down not just because of who dies, but because of how long we're forced to sit in Luffy's desperation. And real quick, that's the question that started haunting me while I was watching. If this is how broken Luffy is at the start of Marineford, before the execution timer even hits 0, what does it even mean for him to keep pushing past this point? What does a victory look like in a battlefield literally engineered to deny him one? With all of that said, let's get into what happens when the war finally answers that question for him. Whitebeard arrives. The ocean itself bows, and the war answers by literally making the ocean kneel. Whitebeard doesn't just arrive, he emerges, like the sea itself has to cough him up. One second it's this frozen graveyard Aokiji made, the next it's cracking, groaning, and this massive ship just rises from underneath the ice like a sea king breaching. The entire bay tilts around him. Buildings look smaller, the execution platform suddenly feels way too close to this man, and I'm sitting there like, nothing could have prepared me for how big he actually feels on screen. In my opinion, this is one of the craziest visual flexes in the whole arc. You don't even need exposition. You just cut to the Marines. Fodder guys are shaking, jaws dropped, some literally fall over. You see vice admirals gripping their weapons tighter. The warlords? Moria's laughing, but you can tell it's nervous. Doflamingo's got that creepy excitement. Mihawk's calm, but he actually comments that it's impossible to measure the distance between them. Like, when the world's greatest swordsman is basically saying, yeah, this gap is insane, you know the power scale just snapped. Even the admirals shift. Aokiji, Kizaru, Akainu, they're all composed, but there's this tension in how they talk, that tiny respect in their eyes. Sengoku isn't relaxed for a single frame. Garp, who has punched Roger and raised Luffy, is just sitting there with that heavy, resigned look, and it hits you. This isn't some random pirate boss. This is the living earthquake holding the balance of the entire era. And real quick, the thing that completely got me is that Whitebeard's first real move is not, let me flex and wipe everyone. It's, where's my son? He doesn't charge the admirals. He doesn't go for Marine HQ. He literally reshapes the map to put himself between Ace and those guns. He tilts the sea, splits the sky, and turns this carefully engineered marine fortress into his own shield. The ice that was trapping his crew becomes their highway. The bay that was a kill box becomes a wall between Ace and execution. This man is terraforming out of love. Where do I even begin with how different that feels from earlier big bads? Crocodile, Enel, Lucci, they're all terrifying, but they're centered on ego, on domination, on proving something. Whitebeard walks in like a dying king who already proved everything decades ago. He's not chasing the Pirate King title, he's protecting a family he chose. You feel the tragedy baked in from frame one. This arc completely broke me down because I realized I wasn't watching the rise of a villain, I was watching the last stand of a father. And the wildest part? This is the entrance that his death is going to rewrite. If this is how the ocean bows when he appears, what happens when it has to accept that he's gone? What does that do to Ace, to Luffy, to an entire generation that grew up in his shadow? We haven't even gotten to his final moments yet. And when we do, this first impression is going to hit completely differently. Pattern break. This isn't just hype, it's horror. And that's exactly where I want to slam the brakes real quick. Because if we just keep riding the hype of Whitebeard's entrance, the admirals, the warlords, all the crazy powers, we miss the part of Marineford that honestly made me the most uncomfortable. Nothing could have prepared me for how much this arc doesn't feel like a war arc. It feels like you're trapped inside a live broadcast execution. It's not just big, it's suffocating. Look at the setup. This isn't a secret execution in some dark prison. They built a stage. They invited the world. They literally turned Ace's death into a global event. You've got civilians cheering in bars, kids watching like it's a sports game, commentators narrating what's happening like it's the Olympics. And over all of that, you have the higher-ups, the Sengokus and the elders, calmly explaining strategy while a human being is chained up to die. How is that not horror disguised as justice? The craziest part is how normal it feels to everyone in the world of the story. The Marines call it justice, the crowd calls it safety, and we're just sitting here like, are we watching a snuff film with commentary? In my opinion, that disconnect is what makes Marineford so disturbing. The war is the distraction. The real monster is this system that can televise a kid's death and call it moral. And then you have Luffy's voice cutting through all of that. Every time he screams, "Ace!" it's like the sound design is grabbing you by the throat. The cannons, the explosions, the cheering, the announcers, all of that just turns into static, and you're left with this one exhausted, bleeding kid begging the entire world not to murder his brother in front of him. That isn't hype. That is nightmare fuel. This is where I really felt the shift from earlier arcs. Eni's lobby was intense, it was emotional, it had huge stakes, but it still felt like an adventure. The Straw Hats were together, they were crashing in on a train, they were declaring war on a flag in this wild, rebellious way. It was dark, but it was still fun. Marineford takes that same idea of standing against the world and strips all the fun out. Luffy is alone, he's out of his depth, and the vibe isn't "we're gonna win", it's "how much is this kid going to lose on camera?" Like, that is insane. This arc completely broke me down not just because of who dies, but because it keeps asking, what does heroism even look like in a world like this? Is Luffy a hero for charging in, or is he just another piece being moved around this execution stage? With all of that said, let's get into how Marineford doesn't just test Luffy's strength, it tears apart his idea of what it means to save someone. Luffy's first push, gear second under fire. So when we zoom in from that huge question of what is heroism, Marineford answers with Luffy just sprinting straight at the execution platform like a madman. No strategy, no rest, just, "My brother is up there. Get out of my way." And nothing could have prepared me for how brutal that first rush really feels when you're already watching him run on fumes from Impel down. He pops gear second almost immediately, and you can feel the urgency in how fast the show cuts. The second his feet hit the ice, the steam is already pouring off him, his skin goes that flushed pink, and the veins in his arms are just screaming. The sound design goes from the big war chaos to this rapid-fire heartbeat of impacts. Every jet pistol, every jet bazooka, it's like they turned the bass up just to tell you, yeah, this is costing him. You're not thinking, oh cool, new form, you're thinking, how is this guy still moving? And in my opinion, that's the crazy genius of these sequences. He's chaining gear second and gear third like a drowning person clawing for air. One moment, he's this blur weaving through nameless Marines. The next, he's inflating his arm to smash a whole section of the front line just to carve a tiny path. He'll punch a literal hole into the battlefield, land, and you realize he's only moved like 20 feet closer. Marineford is huge. The platform might as well be on the moon. Real quick, can we talk about how demoralizing the tug of war is? Every time Luffy gains ground, the arc just throws another wall at him. He breaks through grunts. Suddenly, there's a vice admiral. He dodges cannon fire. Boom! A warlord steps in. He gets help from Whitebeard's commanders, and then an admiral casually drops an attack that wipes out everything he just earned. It feels insane watching the story physically move him forward, then yank him back like a rubber band, snapping against his own body. And the animation sells that cost. His breathing gets heavier, the steam gets thicker, his movements get just a little sloppier. You hear those strained gasps between attacks, and you remember, this dude was literally half dead in a prison like an hour ago. This arc completely broke me down because Gear 2nd here isn't a flex, it's a cry for help. Gear 3rd isn't hype. It's him sacrificing his lifespan, his future, anything, just to maybe get one step closer to Ace. By the time he's stumbling, bloodied, still forcing his legs to move, I started asking myself, how many times can one person throw themselves at an impossible wall before something inside them snaps? Allies in the chaos, Whitebeard's sons and Impel Down's monsters. And this is where the crazy part kicks in, because right when it feels like Luffy should just collapse and stay down, the battlefield itself starts catching him. It's like the war reaches out and says, nope, kid, you're not done yet. Nothing could have prepared me for how many people decide, in this chaos, that they're willing to bleed just to keep this one idiot rubber man running. Where do I even begin with the sheer insanity of these alliances? You've got Whitebeard's commanders carving open paths, random allied pirate crews throwing their ships and bodies into the meat grinder, and then Luffy's Impel Down Suicide Squad just crashing through all of that like a wrecking ball. It's not organized, it's not clean. It feels like a storm of people with different flags, different histories, all orbiting this one goal: get Luffy to Ace. Real quick, Ivankov might be the wildest example of this. This is a revolutionary commander, someone with their own secret war against the world government, literally inflating their head to block cannon fire and lasers for Luffy. They're tanking bullets, screaming encouragement, using hormone powers to force Luffy's broken body to keep going. That's not plot armor, that's a character with a belief system choosing, in my opinion, to bet everything on this kid's will. Then, you've got Jinbei. And Jinbei doesn't just help Luffy, he commits to him. He's grabbing Luffy's unconscious body, turning his own back into a shield, taking hits from admirals and cannons and whatever else the Marines throw out. Watching Jinbei physically cradle Luffy while the world is literally exploding around them, this arc completely broke me down. Like, that is insane loyalty for someone who, at this point, is not officially a crewmate. What I really appreciate is that all of these allies feel like they come from different corners of the story. You have former villains from Impel Down like Crocodile, who is not suddenly a good guy, but he hates the Marines more, and he respects Whitebeard enough to step in. You have Whitebeard's sons, who don't know Luffy, but they know Ace, and that's enough. You have the revolutionaries, who see Luffy as Dragon's Kid and a symbol of the future. Nobody is here just because the plot needs more bodies. They're here because their ideologies intersect in this one impossible moment. But it's not smooth sailing. The tension between Whitebeard's strategy and Luffy's recklessness is constant. Whitebeard is running a war. Luffy is running on emotion. You can almost feel Marco and the others going, who let this rookie into an emperor-level battle? And then immediately having to adapt as Luffy sprints straight at admirals at the scaffold at literal death. How many times do they have to change the plan because Luffy refuses to slow down? And yet, that's the point. The web of support around Luffy is messy, it's costly, and it screams one of the core themes of this entire arc. His real power isn't Gear 2nd or 3rd, it's the people who decide he's worth saving. So when we finally get close to that execution platform, you have to ask yourself, after all this, after everyone who's thrown themselves between Luffy and death, what happens if he still can't reach Ace? Admirals unleashed, touching the ceiling of power. And the brutal answer is, the story makes sure he doesn't just fail against random fodder. He fails against the ceiling of this world. The Admirals are the moment you realize the universe of One Piece is not built for Luffy yet. It's built for them. Where do I even begin with how insane their first showcases are? Aokiji doesn't just freeze a guy. He freezes the entire ocean. The battlefield literally becomes a frozen graveyard because one man casually put his hand in the water. Kizaru shows up as a beam of light, teleports around, and kicks people at the speed of, excuse me, what did I just watch? An Akainu? This man is walking volcanic trauma. His fists are magma, the sky is raining fire, and ships are melting like they're made of butter. These aren't people. They feel like natural disasters that got assigned uniforms. Every time Luffy starts to build momentum, an admiral just steps in and deletes it. He drops from the sky with this insane entrance, rallies allies, pushes forward, and you're like, okay, maybe, just maybe. And then Kizaru lazily points a finger and blasts him away. Aokiji intercepts him like he's swatting a fly. It's not even personal. It's routine. How demoralizing is that to watch? In my opinion, this is one of the smartest and cruelest parts of the arc. Luffy is going beyond empty, physically and emotionally, to reach Ace. He's screaming, bleeding, crying, calling on everything and everyone he has. And the admirals? They're calm. They're bored. They're sitting on those chairs at the start like they're watching a slightly interesting TV show. That contrast between Luffy's frantic desperation and their another day at the office energy makes the power gap feel so much bigger than numbers or bounty posters ever could. Nothing could have prepared me for how much it hurts to actually see Luffy clash with them. On paper, it's hype. Yo, he's throwing hands with admirals already. But watching it, it's like seeing a kid punch a tidal wave. He lands blows, he gets close, he even forces them to acknowledge him for a second. But he's clearly outclassed, and that's the point. This arc completely broke me down because it finally answered the question: can Luffy, right now, truly protect anyone against the full weight of this system? And the answer feels like a painful no. Real quick, I also love how the admirals embody institutional power. They're not just strong, they're backed by the world government, by propaganda, by this whole idea of absolute justice. Luffy is raw human emotion, screaming, "Give me my brother back," and they're the cold machine saying no. And as terrifying as all three are, one of them is about to step out of that machine and become something even worse. Not just an admiral, but the living symbol of everything Luffy is about to lose. Pattern break. Is this still Luffy's story? And that's exactly where I had to stop myself and ask, is this even Luffy's story right now? Because real quick, if you zoom out from the screaming and the blood and the insane clashes, something feels off in the best possible way. We're in a One Piece arc where Luffy is not the central strategic player. He's not making the plan, he's not outsmarting the villain, he's not leading the crew. He is one desperate piece getting tossed around on a board that people like Whitebeard, Sengoku, and the admirals have been playing on for decades. Nothing could have prepared me for how weird that would feel. For 500 plus episodes, the camera loves Luffy. We live in his stupidity, his kindness, his hunger, his punches. Here, the camera keeps drifting away from him. It lingers on Whitebeard just standing there, hooked up to tubes, shaking the world with a swing. It cuts to Sengoku on that platform, literally announcing history. It sits on Garp's face, on those tiny flinches when Ace screams. It follows Aokiji, Kizaru, Akainu, like they're the ones whose choices actually matter. And honestly, in my opinion, that's the point. Marineford feels like an arc about an older generation settling old scores. Roger and Whitebeard's era, Garp's regrets, Sengoku's justice, the world government trying to erase a bloodline. Luffy crashes into that like a meteor, but the crater was dug long before he arrived. How crazy is it that our main character is basically a bystander who hurts really loudly? This can be disorienting. You almost want to grab the story and go, "Hey, get back here, follow Luffy." But the impact of not doing that is insane, because it forces him and us to watch what the endgame of piracy and power actually looks like. This is what happens when dreams scale up. This is the bill for all the "I'm gonna be Pirate King" talk. It's admirals freezing oceans, emperors dying on their feet, governments turning human lives into live television warnings. Marineford, to me, is less about Luffy winning and more about Luffy witnessing. He doesn't change this war. The war changes him. He's dragged across the battlefield, physically broken from Impel Down, emotionally shredded as he sees giants fall, allies die, and his brother turned into a symbol to be executed. This arc completely broke me down because you can feel the story telling Luffy, look, this is the world you picked. This is the scale of what you're up against. And then, pattern break. Amid all that generational noise, there's one moment where the story snaps back, violently, into being about Luffy again. All the admirals, all the warlords, all the marines fade into background radiation for a second, because the only thing that matters is that those handcuffs finally fall, Ace steps forward, and the two brothers actually reunite. How do you go from being a pawn on someone else's board to having the entire narrative heartbeat slam back into your chest in one embrace? With all of that said, let's get into the moment where Marineford stops being a history lesson and becomes Luffy's personal tragedy. Garp, Sengoku, and the weight of family versus duty. And the crazy part is, while we're locked in on that reunion, Oda just quietly cuts to the saddest little stage play happening above them. On one side, you've got Garp, literally sitting next to Ace, slumped forward like the life has already been drained out of him. On the other side, Sengoku, standing tall, hat on, cape flowing, the perfect poster boy for marine justice. same platform, completely different worlds. Where do I even begin with Garp here? This is the guy we've only really known as the goofy grandpa who throws cannonballs with his bare hands and laughs in the face of danger. But in this arc, watching him sit there while his adopted grandson is in chains and his biological grandson is sprinting through hell to get to him, I felt like I was watching a man age decades in a few panels. His fists are clenched, his jaw is tight, but he doesn't move. That stillness is louder than any punch he's ever thrown. Real quick, think about his situation. His whole career, his entire identity has been built on this idea of justice. He turned down promotions, he chased Roger, he trained heroes like Kobe, and now that same system, that same justice, is about to execute the kid he raised as his own because of who his father was. Nothing could have prepared me for how brutal that contradiction feels. How do you reconcile loving Ace and Luffy with believing in the Marines that want Ace dead as a symbol? Then, you look at Sengoku, and he is the complete opposite kind of broken. He's not shaking, he's not slumped. He's the architect of this whole public execution, the one making sure every camera in the world sees Goldie Roger's bloodline erased. In my opinion, Sengoku is the face of the cold logic of the system. To him, Ace isn't a person in this moment, he's a message. This is what happens if you follow in the Pirate King's footsteps. It's insane how calm he is while everything below is just chaos. What really hit me is how these two old men are like mirrors held up to Luffy. Garp is family first, but chained by duty. Sengoku is duty first, pretending family doesn't even exist in the equation. And then you have Luffy, who doesn't care about any of that. No politics, no balance of power, no propaganda. Just, that's my brother, I'm getting him back. This arc completely broke me down by forcing those three worldviews to collide on one tiny platform. So, as Luffy claws his way up there, bloodied, exhausted, screaming Ace's name, you feel that tension tightening. When he finally reaches that platform, when it's no longer theoretical, what does Garp do in that single heartbeat? Does the hero of the Marines stand up? Or does Grandpa Garp? The clock is ticking, execution orders, and escalation. And before you even get to breathe and find out what Garp chooses, the arc just slams you with something even colder. Because while Luffy is dragging his broken body up those steps, the Marines are doing math. They're looking at the chaos, at Whitebeard's ships, at Luffy literally punching through their front line. And they basically go, if we let this keep going, we might actually lose the symbol we're trying to protect. So what do? They don't back down, they move the goalpost, they accelerate Ace's execution. Nothing could have prepared me for how casually they make that call. It's not framed as some big moral debate, it's logistics, it's strategy. Advance the execution time. Like, that is insane. You're watching this insane war arc, all these hype clashes, and then suddenly, the real boss isn't an admiral, it's a clock. And the anime makes sure you feel that. The camera keeps cutting back to that giant timer, those hands creeping forward while the battlefield is just exploding in every direction. You hear the ringing of the bell, this cold, echoing sound over the screams and explosions, and every time the announcer's voice booms out an update, it's like a knife twisting in Luffy's gut. In my opinion, those announcements hurt worse than half the attacks he takes. Real quick, think about what that does to the story. Up until this point, you can kind of trick yourself into believing this is a standard shonen rescue. Beat enough strong guys, power of will, grab your brother, go home. But the second they move up the schedule, it stops being a straight fight. It becomes a race. Every second Luffy spends dodging Kizaru or screaming at Marines is a second Ace is literally being walked closer to death. This arc completely broke me down with that ticking clock. Even when Luffy gets small wins, like pushing forward a few meters or getting help from allies, the show undercuts it by slamming that bell again or cutting back to the platform. You start asking, does any of this matter if he's 30 seconds too late? How brutal is it that the story invites you to celebrate and then reminds you the fuse is still burning? In my opinion, this is one of the most effective tension tools in all of Marineford. It reframes every character's actions, Whitebeard's orders, the Marines' formations, even Garp sitting there, fists clenched. It's all happening under this suffocating countdown. And I'm just sitting there, an emotionally crumpled man on his couch, watching that clock like it's my own heartbeat. And then, when it feels like maybe, just maybe, Luffy's momentum might be enough, the order is finally given. The bell rings. The announcer declares Ace's immediate execution. The camera locks onto the platform. The executioners step forward, raise their swords over Ace's neck. And that's exactly where we're going to pause, because what happens in the next few seconds changes Luffy forever. Pattern break. The moment I realized Luffy might fail. And that's exactly where we're going to pause, because I need to admit something that kind of broke my brain as I was watching. Up until this point in the arc, I still had that shonen safety net in my head. You know what I mean, right? The invisible contract that says, don't worry, the hero will get there at the last second, the execution will be stopped, the music will swell, everyone will cheer. I was fully expecting that classic last-minute save. Of course, Luffy saves Ace. That's the story. That's how this goes. But when the bell rings and the announcer calmly declares Ace's immediate execution, something in the tone just shifts. The swords go up, the camera holds on Ace's neck, and it's quiet in this really sick way. No hype track, no cutaway to the Straw Hats cheering him on, nothing. Just this cold, procedural, we're killing this man now. And in that exact moment, I genuinely felt, oh, he might not make it. The story might actually let Luffy fail. Nothing could have prepared me for how hard that hit. Because shonen conditioning is powerful. We're used to miracles stacking on miracles. The power of friendship, the sudden new form, the villain monologuing just long enough for backup to arrive. But Marineford has been so brutal, so insane with how many walls it throws at Luffy, admirals, warlords, pacifistas, literal giant walls, time itself, that the usual math stops adding up. How many impossible obstacles can one character clear before the story just says, no, that's it, you're done? In my opinion, that's the exact second the arc stopped feeling like an adventure rescue and started feeling like a tragedy countdown. From that point on, I wasn't watching for cool moves anymore. I wasn't like, oh wow, gear second, so hype. I was bracing. Every time Luffy pushed forward, I felt my stomach drop instead of jump. I started watching like you watch a car crash in slow motion, where you're begging for a different outcome even though everything on screen is telling you it's not coming. And real quick, this is where I think One Piece quietly flips a switch with Luffy as a character. Up to now, the series has hurt him, sure, but it always felt survivable. Scars you can slap a bandage on, problems you can punch. But Marineford is the first time the story feels willing to hurt Luffy in ways that don't heal with a good meal and a friendship speech. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and left me as an emotionally crumpled man on my couch. Because what happens if he actually reaches Ace, and it still isn't enough? What does that do to a guy whose whole identity is, I will save my friends? Like, that is insane to even consider in a series that started with goofy pirates in barrels. With all of that said, let's get into what actually happens when Luffy finally gets those cuffs off, because the emotional whiplash of that reunion and what follows right after is something we need to unpack in painful detail. Breaking through. Luffy's path carved in blood. So when I say Luffy gets those cuffs off, I don't mean he just sprints up some stairs and we smash cut to a hug. No, Oda makes this man carve his way through hell first. Nothing could have prepared me for how brutal that last real push toward the platform actually is. There's this one sequence that just lives in my head now. Luffy is already shaking, he's wheezing, his face is pale, and you can feel that impel down, poison, and Marineford damage stacking. And he still just screams, Ace! And barrels forward into a literal wall of marines and bullets. It stops feeling like a normal hype shonen charge and starts feeling like you're watching someone run on broken legs. You ever have that moment where you're like, okay, the main character should actually be unconscious right now? That's this entire stretch. In my opinion, the craziest part is how the story visually shows that he cannot do this alone anymore. Jinbei straight up picks him up and carries him like a ragdoll battering ram, taking hits in his place while Luffy is still swinging his arms and yelling Ace's name. Ivankov is burning life away with those hormone boosts. Whitebeard's allies are literally throwing their bodies into cannon fire just to buy Luffy a few more steps. And as he moves, you can almost see the battlefield closing behind him like a wound, Marines pouring back in, bodies collapsing, blood on the ice. The path exists only because people are actively dying to hold it open, and the injuries just keep piling up. Stab wounds, bullet holes, that insane exhaustion where his eyes are half rolled back but he's still forcing out gear second. The show makes it very clear. Luffy is not just dipping into tomorrow's strength, he's burning years off his future, all to survive this one arc. This arc completely broke me down in that sense because every new cut or gunshot feels like a receipt you're going to have to cash later. How does a human body come back from this? Does it? As someone watching all of this for the first time, I really appreciate how honest it feels about the cost of heroism. It's not just believe in your friends and punch the bad guy. It's watch this kid's hands shake so hard he can barely clench a fist, then watch him clench it anyway. By the time he's actually close enough to reach Ace, you're not thinking, wow, cool rescue. You're thinking, please let this be worth everything he's lost to get here. Like, that is insane emotional pressure to put on a single moment. And that's why, in my opinion, the reunion doesn't feel cheap at all. It feels almost unbearable because you've literally watched the price being paid in real time, step by bloody step. With all of that said, let's get into what happens when he finally makes it. The hug, the words they share, and why it hurt so much even before we knew what was coming next. Garp's fist, Luffy's resolve, the gatekeeper moment. And the crazy part is, just when you think we're finally getting that pure catharsis with the reunion, the story throws one more wall in Luffy's face. Literally, a wall with fists, a wall that's also his grandpa. Like, that is insane. Luffy sprints up to the base of the execution platform. Everything around him is chaos, and then the camera just hard cuts to Garp dropping down in front of him. Fists clenched, jaw locked. You can see the veins, you can see the shadow over his eyes, and you can see that if he lets himself blink for even a second, he's going to start crying. It's such a gut punch visual because we've watched this man laugh, nap, throw cannonballs like baseballs, and now he's the final gatekeeper between Luffy and Ace. In my opinion, this is where the whole conflict between family and duty stops being an idea and becomes a physical punch to the face. Garp is the Marine hero, the guy they literally parade around as proof that justice works. He trained Kobe, he chased the Pirate King, his entire life has been this institution. But he's also the man who raised Ace, who shoved Luffy off cliffs, who wanted these kids to be strong enough to survive this crazy world. How do you choose between the symbol you've been for decades and the actual flesh and blood kid charging at you? And Luffy doesn't hesitate for even a second. There's no speech, no grandpa, please move, none of that anime negotiation. He just screams and swings. He punches the man who sat at Dodon's table, the man who indirectly shaped his entire path by putting him with Ace and Sabo in the first place. Nothing could have prepared me for how raw that felt, because you realize, in that instant, Luffy has already chosen. He chose Ace over everything, over respect, over hierarchy, over any idea of what a grandson is supposed to do. The shot that absolutely wrecked me, though, is Garp taking it. He doesn't dodge. He doesn't counter. He just lets himself get rocked and falls aside. It's played almost quietly in the middle of this insane war. But this arc completely broke me down with that one choice. This is a man who could trade blows with legends, and he decides the way he'll protect his family is by failing his duty on purpose. That's not weakness. That's the most devastating act of love I've seen in this arc. Real quick, how are we just supposed to move on after that? But the story doesn't let you breathe. The second Garp hits the ground, Luffy is already past him, launching himself up toward Ace. The platform looms, the swords are raised, the clock is basically at zero. And as Luffy flies, you can feel that this is it. Does he make it in time? Do we actually get that reunion we've been waiting hundreds of episodes for? Or is Marineford about to be even crueler than I thought? Luffy and Ace, reunited, the hug that broke me, and then he does. Luffy doesn't just make it to the platform, he explodes into it. He comes flying in, coated in blood and sweat and sheer stubborn will, and just absolutely shatters those executioner's swords. Before you can even process that, he's already swinging that key, snapping Ace's sea stone cuffs like they're nothing. The chains that the entire world put on this man just crack in an instant. And the crazy part is, the war is still screaming around them. Cannons, explosions, admirals, Whitebeard literally breaking the sea. But the second those cuffs fall, the whole arc zooms in. It's just their faces. Luffy shaking, gasping, actually sobbing, and Ace with that stunned, wide-eyed look like, you really did it? You actually came all this way for me? Nothing could have prepared me for how quiet that felt in my chest while the battlefield was roaring. This is the idiot little brother who was supposed to stay far away from this level of monsters. And yet, here he is, standing in front of an admiral firing off a punch that cracks the platform, saving the son of the Pirate King in front of the entire world. Like, that is insane. You can see Ace trying to process it. That disbelief, that why, written all over his face. Why did you come? Why did you drag the entire story to the gates of hell just for me? In my opinion, the hug is where all of Ace's guilt just spills out without him even needing to say it. This is a guy who has spent his whole life wondering if he deserved to be born. Roger's son, a walking sin, a weapon the world government wants erased. And now he's watching Luffy collapse into his arms, shaking so hard he can barely stand, after Impel Down, after Sabaody, after losing his entire crew. How do you not ask yourself, do I really deserve this? But Luffy doesn't care about any of that. He's not doing moral calculus. He's not thinking about bloodlines or consequences or the cost of this war. He just clings to Ace like a drowning kid who finally found air again. From Alabasta to Eni's Lobby to Thriller Bark, every time he screamed, "Give my friends back," gets compressed into this one desperate, ugly, beautiful hug. This arc completely broke me down right there. I felt like an emotionally crumpled man just watching them breathe into each other's shoulders. And real quick, that's why this moment hits so hard. It feels like the universe finally letting Luffy win. After everything, he pulled it off. The reunion is so overwhelming, so pure that it almost feels suspicious, because Marineford is cruel, and the more joy it gives you in this scene, the more it feels like the story is setting you up for something even more devastating waiting just beyond that hug. Ace's smile, relief, regret, and inherited will. And you feel that right away in Ace's face. The second the cuffs come off, he's smiling, he's laughing with Luffy, he's throwing fire like a monster again. But watch his eyes. That's where it got me. There's this split second of relief, like he can finally breathe, and then this weird, quiet disbelief, almost like he's asking, did I really deserve all of this? Nothing could have prepared me for how sad his happiness looks. It's crazy. He's joking with Luffy, he's covering him, they're doing brother combo attacks, and yet there's this tiny stiffness around his mouth that never fully goes away. You ever see someone smile at a party, but you can tell they cried in the bathroom 5 minutes before? That's Ace here. He's free, but he's not actually light. And when you remember his backstory, it hits even harder. This is the kid who grew up being told over and over that being Gold D. Roger's son made him a curse, that his very birth was a sin. In my opinion, that line he asked Garp as a kid, "Was it a good thing I was born?" is the core of every expression he has in Marineford. So, when Luffy literally tears the world open to save him, how does someone who's always questioned his right to exist even process that? Of course, his relief is tangled up with this deep, almost nauseating insecurity. Real quick, think about what Ace is seeing around him. Whitebeard taking wounds, commanders dropping, random pirates dying in the crossfire, all because the world government wants to erase Roger's blood and send a message. This arc completely broke me down when I realized Ace is clocking every single body and silently adding it to this invisible debt in his head. He's grateful to Luffy, absolutely, but that gratitude is fused with guilt. How do you say thank you when you know people are literally bleeding out for your sake? Like, that is insane, and that's where the idea of inherited will turn tragic with him. Ace doesn't get to opt out of Roger's legacy. The world decided what his name means long before he could. But he does get to choose what that legacy looks like at the end. Is he just the demon child who ran and got caught? Or is he the man who stood, who loved, who made a choice that would redefine what the name Roger's son actually stands for? Marineford turns that from a vague theme into a brutal, immediate question. With all of that said, let's get into the part that really wrecked me as an emotionally crumpled man in front of my screen. Ace's final decision. Because it doesn't come out of nowhere. It isn't just him being randomly stupid for drama. It's the climax of this exact storm inside him. And when you see the moment he stops running from that inherited will, everything that happens next feels horrifyingly inevitable. Pattern break. The illusion of a happy ending. And when you see the moment he stops running from that inherited will, everything that happens next feels horrifyingly inevitable. But, real quick, I want to slam the brakes here because Marineford does something kind of evil in between all that inevitability. It gives you this tiny, shining illusion of a happy ending. The second those shackles hit the ground and Ace is actually free, the entire tone of the arc whiplashes, the music swells, the pirates start cheering, and you can feel the energy on the battlefield flip like a switch. You go from this suffocating dread to, wait, did they actually pull it off? Luffy collapsing into Ace's arms, Ace catching him, that little smile between them in the middle of absolute chaos. Nothing could have prepared me for how hard that would hit after watching Luffy crawl through Impel Down and Marineford half dead. For a few minutes, it feels like we've earned the classic shonen escape victory. The brothers are reunited, the key objective is cleared, roll credits, right? And then they go back to back, them standing there fighting side by side, literally smiling through the pain as they blast Marines away. That's weaponized nostalgia for a bond we've barely even seen on screen. It taps into this deep, almost childish part of you that just wants these characters to finally get one uncomplicated win. After so much suffering, you look at that, and your brain goes, yeah, this is it. This is the payoff. The story lets them go home now. In my opinion, Oda knows exactly what he's doing in that moment, because here's the pattern break. In so many other series, once the rescue happens, the story starts winding down. Think about it. The prison break succeeds, the kidnapped friend is safe, the war becomes cleanup duty, the tension bleeds out, but Marineford is insane because freeing Ace is not the end of the tragedy. It's the midpoint. It's the last high before the drop. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and spat me back out as an emotionally crumpled man specifically because of that structure. The high is deliberately constructed to be ripped away. You're not just sad when it all goes wrong. You feel tricked, almost complicit because you believed in that fake ending. Like, that is insane storytelling. And here's where the war quietly shifts. The second you buy into the happy escape version of Marineford, the story pivots. It stops being about, can they save Ace, and starts being about, what does Ace's death do to this world, to Whitebeard's legacy, to Luffy's entire future? You don't realize it yet, but the real impact hasn't even landed. With all of that said, let's get into the exact moment that illusion shatters, and how one punch, one taunt, and one decision turn a victory lap into a funeral march. Whitebeard's last stand, a dying era, roars, and that funeral march line, it's not poetic exaggeration. It's literally what happens when Whitebeard decides, in real time, that his life is the price for everyone else getting out. Nothing could have prepared me for how calm he is about his own death, while the entire battlefield is losing its mind. Look at his condition at this point. The man is riddled with stab wounds and bullet holes. Half his face is gone by the end. He's been betrayed on live TV by a son he forgave, and he's still standing there like a broken mountain that refuses to erode. How is this guy even upright? How is he still splitting the island with his bare hands? It's insane, but it never feels cheap, because the story has spent the whole arc building him up as this immovable wall between his family and the world. The moment he tells his crew to turn the ship around and retreat, that's the real pivot. Up to then, it's save Ace. After Ace dies, it becomes save the future. Whitebeard just silently accepts, yeah, my era is over. I don't get to see the new world. My job is to make sure these kids do. In my opinion, that's one of the craziest emotional flips in Marineford. He doesn't beg to live. He doesn't cling to the throne of strongest man. He just chooses to be the last line so Ace, Luffy, and the others have even a sliver of a chance. And the brutality of those final moments is unreal. He's taking direct hits from Akainu, chunks of his body are literally missing, cannon fire is raining down, and he refuses to fall. The narrator flexing on us with the not a single scar on his backline while we're watching him get torn apart from the front? Like, that is insane. Every swing of that Bicento feels less like an attack and more like he's carving his will into Marineford itself. You will remember I stood here. You will remember why. This arc completely broke me down when I realized his death isn't framed as just sad. It's mythic. It feels like watching a legend write his own epitaph in real time. He announces that the great pirate era won't end with him. He rejects the idea that Roger's blood is a curse, and he basically hands the narrative baton to the next generation while the world is forced to watch. I was sitting there like an emotionally crumpled man thinking, oh, this is the moment the story itself changes. And then, real quick, with his last breath, he drops the line. The line, One Piece is real. 4 words that explode every lie, every piece of marine propaganda, every doubt. With all of that said, let's get into why that one sentence might actually be the most important line in the entire series so far, and what it does to this world the second it leaves his mouth. One Piece is real. A declaration to the future. The way Oda frames it is actually insane. Whitebeard isn't just yelling to the plaza, he's yelling to the cameras, to the transponders, to every random person sitting in a bar or a village or a marine base just watching this war like it's a show. The sound cuts, the music drops, the panel zooms in on his face and he just roars, "The One Piece is real!" And the world stops. You see Marines freeze mid-attack, jaws literally hanging open. You see pirates crying, laughing, losing their minds. Sengoku's face is pure horror, like he just watched decades of carefully built propaganda evaporate in one sentence. Civilians who were told that Roger's words were a lie are now hearing the strongest man in the world confirm it on live TV. This isn't a rumor anymore. It's a broadcast. It's a declaration to history. Why does that matter so much? Because the world government has been trying to put the genie back in the bottle since Roger's execution. Control the story, control the era, right? But with this one moment, Whitebeard does the exact opposite. He takes their neat little Ace's execution will crush piracy plan and flips it. Instead of fear, he spreads possibility. Instead of closing the book, he throws it wide open and invites everyone to write a new chapter. In my opinion, this is the true start of the next pirate age. Every kid who ever stared at the sea and wondered if the legends were fake just got their answer. Every would-be pirate who was on the fence just got the biggest green light imaginable. Nothing could have prepared me for how hype and scary that feels at the same time. It's like watching someone pour gasoline over the entire world and then hand the match to the future. And that's where Luffy comes in. Because for Luffy, this isn't just some abstract world era speech. This is personal validation. His whole journey, people have called him an idiot for chasing a fairy tale. Even in this arc, we see Marines mocking the idea of Pirate King like it's a joke. But now, the man who stood shoulder to shoulder with Roger's generation, the guy they literally called the strongest, uses his dying breath to say, "No, the dream is real." How do you even process that when you're already emotionally shattered, bleeding out, and just trying to save your brother? This line feels like a narrative handoff. Whitebeard knows his era is over. He's not going to be the one to reach Laugh Tale, so he does the only thing he can. He protects the possibility. He passes the torch to the next generation, to Shanks, to Blackbeard, to every supernova, and yeah, to Luffy, even though they never actually fight side by side. But the cruel part is that while the world is being filled with hope by that sentence, Luffy's personal world is about to be destroyed. Because right after this grand, era-defining declaration, Akainu stops thinking about symbols and starts aiming at something much smaller, much more fragile, two brothers standing together, finally free. And what he does next? That's where this arc completely broke me down. Akainu, the face of ruthless justice. And what he does next? That's where this arc completely broke me down. Because Akainu doesn't just throw a punch, he weaponizes an entire ideology. From the second he steps into this war, he is ice cold in a way that somehow feels worse than Aokiji literally freezing the ocean. No hesitation, no doubt, no cracks. He is the guy who looks at this insane battlefield, at giants and emperors and admirals clashing, and goes, "Yeah, all of this is worth it if it means erasing one pirate." How do you even argue with someone who thinks like that? His whole vibe is this terrifying, uncompromising belief that absolute justice justifies anything. Civilians dying, collateral, Marines dying, necessary, pirate kids screaming for their lives, just more sinners to burn. And the crazy part is, he genuinely believes he's right. It's not cartoon villain mustache twirling. Watching him, I felt like I was staring at the logical endpoint of Marine propaganda. Take that poster slogan of justice and run it all the way to its ugliest conclusion. You really see it in the moments where he goes way beyond strategy. Like real quick, provoking scored by lying about Whitebeard selling out his own men? That's not just tactics. That's psychological warfare on a father and his entire family. Then, on the battlefield, he's not content with just fighting Whitebeard's forces. He's actively poking at their hearts, calling Whitebeard a loser, calling Ace's very existence a crime, dragging Roger, dragging Whitebeard, dragging Ace's entire family line like he's trying to salt the earth around this man's soul. And then there's Luffy. This dude is in the middle of the biggest war in the series, surrounded by legends, and he zeroes in on this one rubber kid who is already half dead. Why? Because he understands that Luffy isn't just a body, he's a symbol. If you burn the kid who broke into Impel Down, crashed Marineford, and freed the son of the Pirate King, you don't just kill a pirate, you crush morale. You send a message to every dreamer watching. In my opinion, that's what makes Akainu so terrifying. He stops feeling like a regular character and starts feeling like a force of nature in Luffy's life. He's not just Sakazuki the Admiral anymore. He's the living embodiment of a system that will take everything from you and then tell you it was righteous. When his magma fist comes down, it's not just lava. It's the weight of the Navy, the world government, the celestial dragons, every justice speech we've heard up to this point. And the worst part? It works. His words get under Ace's skin so deeply that even after freedom is right there, Ace turns back. Because Akainu doesn't just attack bodies, he attacks pride, he attacks identity, and that one choice Ace makes to answer him. That's the moment where everything shatters. With all of that said, let's get into the confrontation that changes Luffy's life forever. The choice. Why Ace turned back. So we cut from Akainu getting in Ace's head straight into what might be the most painful what if in this entire arc. Luffy and Ace are actually running, like they did it. After everything, the chains are gone, the platform is behind them, and the path is open. You can literally see this tunnel of possibility in front of them. Freedom is right there, and nothing could have prepared me for how fast it all slips. Because then, Akainu does the one thing he's best at, weaponizing words. He doesn't chase their backs first, he goes after their hearts. He calls Whitebeard a loser, a failure of a captain, a man who couldn't become king and couldn't protect his sons. And the way the panel and the anime frame it, you almost feel the temperature drop. Ace is mid-stride, and he just stops. His whole body freezes. His expression hardens in this way that feels so different from the goofy, warm Ace we've been watching with Luffy. His shoulders tense, his eyes go dark, and you can tell he's not hearing "keep running" anymore. He's hearing all those years of being told he shouldn't have been born, all that self-hatred crashing into the one man who told him he was worth loving. In that split second, Whitebeard isn't just his captain, he's the proof Ace deserved to exist. So when people ask, did Ace betray Luffy's sacrifice by turning back? I get it. You're watching Luffy literally destroy his body, his mind, his future for this one goal, and then Ace spins around because a guy said some mean words? On paper, it sounds insane, right? But emotionally, in my opinion, it's almost scarily consistent with who Ace is and what he values. This is a guy whose entire life has been a war over his own worth. Son of the Pirate King, hunted from birth, convinced the world would be better without him. Whitebeard shows up, calls him son, takes that cursed bloodline and says, "You are my family." Of course, Ace will throw his life away to defend that. For him, defending Whitebeard's honor isn't a side quest, it's his purpose. Real quick, ask yourself, if he had kept running while someone spat on the man who gave him everything, would that even be Ace anymore? This arc completely broke me down because the tragedy isn't that he makes an out-of-character mistake. It's that he makes the most Ace decision possible at the worst time imaginable. He plants his feet, turns back toward Akainu, and chooses pride, love, and inherited will over survival. And as he winds up to answer that insult, as Akainu's magma fist starts to swing toward them, you realize this tiny, stubborn heartbeat of a choice is the hinge the entire story is about to swing on. And then, the blow comes crashing down. The fatal blow. Luffy's world shatters in an instant, and then the blow comes crashing down. And the whole world just stops. Akainu's fist doesn't just hit Ace, it eats through him. You see that magma punch bloom in his back, the fire and smoke mixing with Ace's own flames, and for a second, my brain refused to process what I was watching. The sound design goes weirdly quiet, like the arc itself is holding its breath. No big dramatic music, no hype chorus, just this horrible, echoing silence over the battlefield. How is it this loud and this quiet at the same time? Bodies freeze mid-swing, Marines, pirates, everyone just stares. You can almost feel the heat of the magma and the cold of that realization at once. Ace isn't blocking it, he's taking it. For Luffy. And Luffy is right there, inches away, hands still outstretched like he's trying to grab a future that's already been punched through. Luffy's reaction, nothing could have prepared me. His eyes go so wide they barely look human anymore. His mouth opens but no sound comes out. He's not screaming yet because his brain hasn't caught up. He looks down, slowly, at the hole in Ace's chest, and you can see the exact frame where "we made it" turns into "this can't be real." How do you even describe that kind of emotional whiplash? This arc completely broke me down in that single moment. We've watched Luffy get crushed, poisoned, frozen, punched through buildings, and he always pops back up, right? But here, he just collapses internally. His breath is gone, his hands start shaking. He doesn't even move to fight Akainu because what is there to punch when the damage is already done? And then Ace starts talking. Why is he still trying to comfort Luffy? Why is he the one smiling? He thanks everyone, he talks about Whitebeard. But when he looks at Luffy and says that having him as a brother made him happy, that Luffy gave him a reason to live, like, that is insane. Those words are so soft and so kind, and they land like a sledgehammer. It's the most comforting thing Ace could say, and the most devastating thing Luffy could ever hear. In my opinion, this is the single most brutal scene in One Piece so far, and it's not about gore. It's the helplessness. Luffy has spent this entire war breaking his body to reach Ace, and at the one moment it matters most, he can't do anything. No gear second, no conqueror's haki, no clever plan. Just watching, shaking, holding his brother as the life literally burns out of him. And the crazy part is, Ace dying is not even the end of the damage. This is the crack, the shatter, the point where Luffy's mind just falls off a cliff. Because the minutes and hours after this, that's where we really see what losing Ace does to him. And it's honestly terrifying to watch. Luffy's scream. When a hero breaks, and then it hits. That scream. Nothing could have prepared me for that sound coming out of Luffy. It's not a shonen power-up yell, it's not a I'll surpass my limits kind of thing. It sounds like something that got ripped out of his chest against his will, like his body is trying to eject the pain because his brain literally can't process what just happened. You can almost feel his voice tearing as he realizes Ace is actually gone. In my opinion, this is the most disturbing Luffy moment in the entire arc. We've heard him shout in anger, in joy, in determination. But this is an animal noise. It's a kid who just watched his whole world die in his arms. The way the scream keeps going, cracking, echoing over the battlefield while everything else is chaos. It stopped feeling like hype anime and started feeling like I was intruding on someone's worst day, and then his body just shuts off. 1 second he's clutching Ace, screaming, shaking, and the next he goes limp, completely limp. His eyes glaze over, his mouth hangs open, and he's just gone. Not dead, but not really alive in the moment either. You've got admirals, Yonko crews, marines, all still clashing around him, and Luffy is sitting there like a broken doll in the middle of a hurricane. That visual is insane. We've seen Luffy get knocked out before, right? Poisoned, crushed, exhausted. But those are physical limits. This is his mind hitting a wall and saying, nope, we're done. His coping mechanisms, that goofy optimism and blind faith that everything will somehow work out, finally fail. And when they fail, there's nothing underneath except a traumatized teenager who has lost his brother after already losing his crew, his ship, his sense of safety in the world. Real quick, can we talk about how risky this is for a series like One Piece? So many long-running shonen arcs do the big sad moment and then bounce back with a speech, a new power, a training montage. But this arc completely broke me down because Oda doesn't give Luffy, or us, that easy reset. The story just lets him be broken. It lingers on his empty stare, on how he doesn't respond, on how people have to physically drag him out because he's not choosing to live in that moment. With all of that said, let's get into why I think this is the line where One Piece becomes a different kind of story. This isn't just he'll be sad for an episode and then smile again. You can feel that something inside Luffy has snapped in a way that can't be fixed by punching the right villain. And the crazy part? Marineford doesn't even have time to unpack that. Because the true consequences of this breakdown, the long-term psychological damage, the way it reshapes his entire journey, that doesn't really hit until the post-war arc. And that's a whole other emotional disaster I was absolutely not ready for. Pattern break. This is when One Piece became a tragedy for me. And that's actually where I want to zoom out for a second, because this is the moment where One Piece stopped being just an adventure for me and quietly turned into a tragedy. Up until Marineford, even with all the dark stuff, I still felt like I was on this crazy, fun roller coaster where the core crew would always, somehow, be okay. Arlong Park, brutal, but cathartic. Robin's I Want to Live, terrifying, but we win. We save her, we sail away. Even when the crew gets separated at Sabayote, I'm thinking, alright, this is scary, but they'll regroup, right? That's just how this story works. Nothing could have prepared me for watching Ace actually die and realizing, in real time, that there is no safety net here. No Dragon Ball wish, no time travel, no magic doctor who's going to run in like, surprise, he's fine. The series just takes him, permanently. And not some side character we met 3 episodes ago, but the person Luffy literally calls his brother. The guy whose Viver card has been haunting us for hundreds of episodes. When the camera lingers on Luffy's empty arms after Ace falls, that's when it hit me. This world is willing to permanently erase the people he loves. That sounds obvious, but emotionally, that is insane. I'd been trained by so many long-running shonen to expect an undo button somewhere. Here, the story just stares you down and says, no, you don't get that. And from that point on, everything going forward feels different. Every big conflict now has this extra layer of dread, because I no longer trust that everyone's making it out. When I think about the Straw Hats running into another emperor, or Luffy charging an admiral again, there's this little voice in the back of my head going, remember Marineford. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and rebuilt my expectations as this new, emotionally crumpled man who does not assume plot armor exists. In my opinion, this is the exact point where One Piece fully embraces tragedy as part of its identity, not just as occasional seasoning on top of the hype adventure. The comedy, the dreams, the wild powers, they're all still here, but now they sit right next to irreversible loss. The show is basically saying, you want the joy of found family? Cool. You're also going to feel what it means to lose that family. And real quick, that's why I think Marineford hits so hard thematically. It's not just, wow, big war, crazy powers. It's using this irreversible death to make a statement about what justice looks like, what family actually means, and what it costs to chase a dream in a world built to crush you. With all of that said, let's get into what this arc is really saying about those ideas. Because the more I think about it, the more disturbing this version of justice becomes. Justice on trial, Marines versus Pirates reframed. And the crazy part is, Marineford isn't just disturbing because of the body count. It's disturbing because it's all dressed up as a celebration. This is a scheduled, televised, stadium-filling execution. The world government literally builds a coliseum, invites the world to tune in, and says, "Behold our justice." Like, that is insane. It's not justice, it's theater. It's propaganda with blood on it. You've got civilians cheering, kids watching like it's a sports event, the commentators hyping up the Marines as heroes. But what are we actually watching? A man chained up for his bloodline, a son being used as bait to drag his pirate father into a trap, manipulation, lies about who started what, and a government fully willing to sacrifice thousands of its own soldiers just to make a point. Nothing could have prepared me for how gross that contrast would feel while I was watching. And inside that same system, you see this wild spectrum of what justice even means. On one end, you've got a Kainu, who is literally willing to blow up his own men's ship just because they're scared and retreating. Absolute justice. No nuance, no mercy, just if you hesitate, you die. On the other end, you've got Garp, this living legend of the Marines, sitting on the execution platform, physically shaking because his grandson is attacking and his other grandson is about to be killed. How do you even call that the same side? Sengoku is such an interesting middle point. In my opinion, he's not cartoonishly evil, but he is the face of the performance. He announces Ace's lineage like a showman. He calculates every move. He's the director of this entire tragedy. And then you have Kobe, this tiny speck in the war, literally dropping his weapon and screaming that this needs to stop, that too many people are dying. The fact that a random rookie Marine is the one voicing the moral core of the arc while the fleet admiral keeps the show going is just... yeah, this arc completely broke me down. Meanwhile, look at the so-called villains. Whitebeard isn't here to burn the world. He's here for one thing, his son. His crew, these dangerous pirates, spend the whole arc throwing their bodies in front of attacks, crying for each other, coordinating just to open a path for Luffy and Ace. Even when Scored betrays him, Whitebeard hugs him and takes the blame onto himself, who actually feels like the safer person to stand behind in this war. Real quick, this is where Marineford completely reframed the story for me. Up to now, it's easy to think, okay, Luffy versus this villain, that villain, some big bad pirate at the end. But Marineford makes it painfully clear that the real long-term antagonist isn't any single crew. It's the world government itself. It's this entire system that can stage a live tragedy, call it justice, and have the world clap. So what does it even mean for Luffy to say, "I'm going to be Pirate King," in that kind of world? Is he just chasing treasure, or is he accidentally declaring war on the very idea of this fake justice? When the people in power are willing to orchestrate something like Marineford in broad daylight, what kind of king is Luffy actually trying to become? Luffy's limits, exhaustion, trauma, and the human body. And that's where Luffy's body becomes a part of the answer. Because look at what this kid has gone through just to even stand in Marineford. Sabaody absolutely shattered him. One punch from a celestial dragon, Kuma popping his entire crew out of existence in front of his eyes, that helpless breakdown where he's just screaming their names. Then, he crash lands on Amazon Lily, gets launched straight into Impel Down, fights through multiple levels of literal hell, gets poisoned to the brink of death by Magellan, barely survives thanks to Ivankov, and then immediately sprints into a full-scale world war. Nothing could have prepared me for how insane that escalation actually feels when you watch it back to back. By the time he drops from the sky into Marineford, he is already done. His HP bar is at, like, negative numbers, and the story does not hide that. His hands are shaking constantly, his breathing is ragged, his eyes are unfocused. He has those delayed reactions where people shout his name and it takes a second to register. Every new Gear Second burst looks less like a hype power-up and more like he's literally burning what's left of his life away. In my opinion, this is one of the only shonen arcs I've seen where the protagonist's body is treated like a real, breakable human body in the middle of all the crazy powers. And while his body is falling apart, his mind is right there with it. This arc completely broke me down watching Luffy go from determined to frantic to outright desperate. He keeps seeing Ace dragged away. The execution time moved up, Whitebeard bleeding out, allies dropping left and right. You can almost feel his brain tunnel visioning around one thought: save Ace, save Ace, save Ace. Every time something goes wrong, he doesn't process it, he just screams and pushes harder. How many times did you catch yourself thinking, he cannot keep doing this, and then he does it anyway? That's why Ace's death hits like a truck. It's not just that Luffy fails, it's that his entire system finally shuts down. The kid who always gets back up just doesn't. His eyes go empty, his body goes limp. He's not even crying at first, he's just gone. Watching that, I kind of felt like an emotionally crumpled man on my couch because the story is basically saying, this is what happens when you run on willpower alone. Like, that is insane for a series that started with a goofy rubber boy in a barrel. With all of that said, let's get into why Marineford feels like the narrative slamming the brakes on Luffy's whole approach to life. He can't keep throwing himself at walls like this and expect to protect anyone, right? So, what happens when someone like Luffy is finally forced to stop running, stop fighting, and actually sit with this level of failure and pain? That's where the post-war arc comes in, and nothing could have prepared me for what that looks like. Ace's legacy, was his death meaningless? So when I say nothing could have prepared me for Ace's death, I don't just mean the visual of it. I mean the way it made me angry at him, angry at the story, and honestly, a little angry at myself for caring this much about a fictional guy with freckles. Because my first gut reaction, why did you turn back? Why would the story reunite these brothers after 500 plus episodes just to rip him away seconds later? Escape was right there. They literally broke the chains, punched a hole through the entire Marine lineup. Ivankov and the Impel Down squad are buying time. Whitebeard is holding the world on his back, and for one shining moment you feel like they did it. And then, Akainu opens his mouth, trashes Whitebeard, pokes at Ace's pride, and Ace bites. In that instant, it feels like the most meaningless death imaginable. You're watching like, are you serious? We went through Impel Down, this entire war, all this insane build, for you to turn around because a dude insulted your dad? And emotionally, that interpretation is real. It feels like the story is trolling you. It doesn't feel like a noble, pre-planned sacrifice. It feels like a dumb, heat-of-the-moment decision that throws everything away. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and spat me back out as an emotionally crumpled man because it doesn't give you time to process. Luffy's hand is literally on Ace's back as the punch goes through. How do you not call that pointless in the moment? But then, when I calm down for like 2 seconds and actually think about Ace as a character, the crazy part is, it also feels consistent. This is the guy who went after Blackbeard alone. The guy who could never accept that his existence had value, who grew up wondering if the world wished he'd never been born. Whitebeard wasn't just his captain, he was the first person who said, you deserve to live. So when Akainu spits on that, Ace isn't just defending a flag. He's defending the only version of himself that ever felt worthy. In my opinion, that's why it hurts so much. It's not a clean, heroic, I'll stay behind while you all escape sacrifice. It's messy, it's human, it's rooted in pride, love, and all the flaws we've seen in him from Alabasta to that flashback on the Moby Dick. And because of that, it changes Luffy forever. Real quick, I don't want to pretend I've landed on one perfect reading of this moment. I really appreciate that Ace's death keeps bothering me. Was it avoidable? Yes. Was it in character? Also, yes. Is it meaningful or meaningless? I think Marineford wants us to sit in that tension, to keep questioning it as the story moves on. With all of that said, let's get into how Luffy carries this loss into post-war, because the fallout from this one punch is insane. Key. Pattern break. Comparing Marineford to Enies Lobby. But real quick, I want to slam the brakes on Marineford for a second and jump back in time. Because while I was watching all of this, my brain kept screaming one thing. This is Enies Lobby's evil big brother. Remember Enies Lobby? That was our first huge rescue someone from the world government arc. The Straw Hats literally declare war on the flag, storm a fortress city, and race up this insane tower just to bring Robin back from a public execution. You've got the sea train, the Rocketman launch, Luffy versus Lucci, that iconic I want to live moment. It's intense, it's emotional, but it still feels like an adventure, right? In Enia's lobby, I always felt like the story was saying, if the crew believes hard enough and pushes hard enough, they can punch through anything. The tone is desperate, but kind of triumphant. You're watching this found family move as a unit, every single member contributing, and deep down you're like, yeah, they're going to pull this off. Nothing could have prepared me for how different that same basic setup would feel at Marineford, because on paper, the structure is insanely similar. You've got a fortress stronghold, you've got a ticking clock to a public execution, you've got the whole world watching to see what justice looks like. It's the same skeleton, but the flesh on Marineford is so much crueler. Instead of the Straw Hats as this tight squad, Luffy is basically alone, crashing into an already ongoing war between monsters. The chaos is on another level. The camera isn't following our crew anymore, it's following history. And the outcomes? That's where it really hits. Eni's lobby ends with Robin saved, the crew sailing away, battered but together, the Going Merry's farewell breaking us down but still wrapped in this feeling of earned victory. Marineford takes that same energy of charging the execution platform, and then Ace dies anyway. Like, that is insane. It's the same genre of moment with the opposite result. In my opinion, that's why Marineford feels like Eni's lobby's older, crueler sibling. Eni's lobby is what happens when the stakes are one crew versus one branch of the government. Marineford is what happens when the stakes are the entire era, the balance of the world, and Luffy is just one tiny, screaming human being trying to swim against a tidal wave. And this is where I really appreciate the long build. You can feel how much the series has grown in scale and emotional ambition. What started as save our friend from the bad guys evolves into watch a generation get crushed so the next one can stand. It takes that Eni's lobby hope and asks, okay, what if hope isn't enough this time? With all of that said, let's get into how that shift absolutely destroys Luffy in post-war, because if Eni's lobby made him a hero, Marineford makes him human. The world after Whitebeard, power vacuums and uncertainty. So if Marineford makes Luffy human, it also does something way bigger in the background. It breaks the world. Like, I finished the war and just sat there thinking, wait, what does the ocean even look like without Whitebeard on it? Nothing could have prepared me for how loud that silence feels once he's gone. You can feel it in the immediate reactions. The pirates on that battlefield aren't just scared of losing a fight, they're scared because the sun they've been orbiting around just exploded. Marines are cheering, but even in their faces there's this flicker of, did we actually just kill the guy holding half the monsters in check? It's victory and pure panic sharing the same frame. That's insane. In my opinion, that's the genius of Whitebeard's role. Up to this point, I'd been told he was the strongest man in the world, this big final boss. But watching the arc, you realize he was more like a walking peace treaty. His name alone stabilized the new world. You don't raid this island, you don't touch this village. You do not mess with these seas because they're under his flag. The world government hated him, but they were also low-key benefiting from the order he created. And then Marineford just cuts that pillar out, publicly, brutally, on camera. The territory that used to be safe under his mustache umbrella is now basically a Black Friday sale for warlords, emperors, and every ambitious upstart with a ship. You can already feel the power vacuum forming while his body is still standing. Who moves in first? Who pretends to be a protector while actually being a predator? It's like Oda flips the chaos switch in real time. Real quick, think about what that means for Luffy and the Straw Hats. The first half of the story, as crazy as it was, had training wheels. You had Shanks out there, you had Whitebeard out there. These huge dads of the sea kind of unintentionally cushioning the worst possibilities. After this war, those cushions are gone. When the crew finally sails into the new world, they're not entering the same playground Ace and Whitebeard knew. They're walking into a feeding frenzy built on the ruins of this arc. That's why, to me, Marineford doesn't feel like a traditional climax. It's not the top of a mountain, it's a controlled demolition of the status quo. The Marines think they've proven their justice, but what they've really done is kick out the load-bearing wall of their own world to send a message. This arc completely broke me down because you realize the second half of One Piece isn't just more adventure, it's a different planet. So that leaves one terrifying, exciting question hanging over everything. In a world shattered and rebuilt by this war, what kind of pirate king can Luffy even become? Shanks steps in, ending a war with presence alone. And just when I'm sitting here like an emotionally crumpled man asking what kind of pirate King Luffy can even become in this broken world, a red-haired walking reset button strolls in and says, "Actually, stop." Shanks doesn't arrive like a savior from the sky. He just walks, calm, composed, in the middle of hell. Where do I even begin with how insane that entrance is? We've just watched Whitebeard die, Ace die, Luffy shatter emotionally, the Marines lose their minds, Blackbeard flex on a corpse, the whole arc building and building into this uncontrollable storm. And then Shanks literally steps onto the battlefield and the storm gets embarrassed and goes home. He doesn't scream. He doesn't beg. He just says, "If you're still itching for a fight, we'll be your opponents." And suddenly, nobody's itching anymore. Like, that is insane. Real quick, think about who is actually standing there. Sengoku, Garp, admirals, warlords, the full weight of Marineford's justice. Shanks is technically an enemy, a Yonko, the exact kind of pirate this entire war was supposed to crush. And yet Sengoku listens. He doesn't just tolerate him, he agrees to his terms. He lets Shanks take Whitebeard's and Ace's bodies. What does that say about Shanks' position in this world? How much power and respect do you have to command for the fleet admiral to basically go, "Yeah, if you say it's over, it's over"? In my opinion, this is Oda quietly screaming at us about the top tier. Marineford already showed me the admirals freezing oceans and punching magma through giants, but Shanks shuts all of that down with presence alone. No big flashy fight, no named attack, just that one panel of him blocking Akainu's punch like it's nothing, and everyone instantly recalculating their life choices. You feel the story telling you, you haven't seen anything yet, and it completely reframes his earlier, more playful appearances. That goofy guy in a bar who let bandits pour drinks on his head, the dude losing an arm for a kid because he believed in his future. Watching this now, nothing could have prepared me for how much of that was a mask, or at least just one side of him. Underneath the jokes and the party vibes is someone so terrifyingly respected that even in the middle of the most important war in the series, the world government basically taps out. This arc completely broke me down, but Shanks showing up here almost feels like the series patting me on the head and saying, "By the way, there are still mysteries, still monsters, still kings you don't understand yet. If one man can walk into Marineford and end history's biggest war with a sentence, what happens when that same man starts moving in the new world? What does that mean for Luffy's future? And what if this wasn't Shanks' last warning, but his first?" Kobe's breakdown, a small voice against a giant machine. And yet, while Shanks is out here ending a war with one sentence, Oda cuts to the tiniest voice on that battlefield, and it absolutely wrecked me. Nothing could have prepared me for how hard Kobe's breakdown would hit in the middle of all this insane, world-shaking hype. You've got giants falling, admirals throwing around apocalyptic powers, history literally being rewritten in real time, and then this kid Marine, who we met back when Luffy was just a goofy rubber rookie, just snaps. He's shaking, he's crying, he's looking around at the corpses piling up, and he finally screams for everyone to stop. He's not making some grand speech about ideology, he's just begging. This is pointless, people are dying, what are we even doing? And I'm sitting there watching like, how is this the most human moment in the entire war? In my opinion, that's exactly why it hits so hard. Marineford is built up as this massive clash of legends, but Kobe's moment rips the camera away from the monsters and forces you to feel the cost on the ground. He's exhausted, traumatized, completely out of his depth, and yet he's the first Marine to say out loud what we've been thinking. This isn't justice, this is slaughter. How crazy is it that the bravest act in an arc full of gods punching each other might be a terrified teenager saying no? And Akainu's reaction is instant. No hesitation, no debate, no, "You're confused, soldier." He just turns, calls it cowardice, and moves to erase Kobe from existence. Like, that is insane. This is the purest form of absolute justice we've seen. If you question the machine kills you. In that one swing, the story crystallizes what Marine justice really is at its extreme. It's not about protecting people, it's about obedience. It's about never letting someone like Kobe interrupt the narrative. Real quick, this is where this arc completely broke me down as an emotionally crumpled man. Because the second Akainu goes in for the kill, I genuinely thought, oh, Oda's going to prove the system always wins. The small voice gets snuffed out. And then Shanks appears. Again, he blocks the blow, saves Kobe's life, and just by standing there, he basically says, "You were right to speak." How How do you even process that? Shanks validating Kobe isn't just cool fan service, it's thematic. It shows that even in a world run by these giant, uncaring institutions, a single frightened person can still matter if someone powerful chooses to listen. It turns Kobe's breakdown from a death wish into a spark. With all of that said, let's get into why, for me, Marineford stops being just pirates versus Marines at this point and becomes people versus systems, and what that's going to do to Luffy going forward. Luffy carried away. Retreat, not victory. And this is where it all just collapses. We go from people versus systems, from Kobe screaming at the sky, to this brutal, quiet image of Luffy being carried away like a corpse. Nothing could have prepared me for how emotionally hollow that escape would feel. The chaos is still insane. Cannons firing, Marines shouting, pirates scrambling, the battlefield literally cracking apart. But right in the middle of all that noise, Jinbei is just clutching Luffy's limp body, blood everywhere, eyes rolled back, and sprinting for his life. You've got Law's submarine, you've got people covering them, you've got the last few allies throwing themselves between Luffy and death, and Luffy himself is completely gone. He's not the one driving the story anymore, he's cargo. In my opinion, that visual alone is one of the most violent subversions of shonen energy I've seen. Think about how arcs usually end in this kind of series, right? The hero staggers away from the battlefield, maybe beaten up, maybe barely standing, but they walk. They plant the flag. They smile through the bruises. They yell about meat. Here, our main character is unconscious, not even aware that the arc is ending without him. And the crazy part is, technically, they escape. If you just wrote it down on paper, you could say, hey, Luffy survived Marineford, some allies made it out, Shanks stepped in, the war stopped. That should feel like a win, right? So why does it feel so wrong? Why, watching Jinbei haul this broken kid through hell, does it feel like we're watching the aftermath of a total defeat rather than a narrow victory? Because Marineford is a loss for Luffy on almost every level. He didn't save Ace. He didn't win the war. He didn't topple the system or punch the real villains in the face the way we're used to. He barely survived, and only because a ridiculous number of other characters threw their lives, their reputations, and their bodies in front of him. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and spat me back out as this new, emotionally crumpled man who's staring at the screen going, was any of that enough? Real quick, compare this to something like Eni's Lobby. That arc ends with the Going Merry's funeral, which is devastating, but we still have that sense of chosen family winning, of Luffy screaming for Robin's life and actually getting her back. Here, Luffy screams for Ace, reaches him, literally unlocks the cuffs, and still loses him. Like, that is insane. The retreat isn't catharsis, it's evacuation. And as Jinbei dives into the sea with Luffy's unconscious body, it really hit me that Marineford's impact doesn't stop with the war ending. This isn't the resolution. It's the wound, the real story of what this loss does to Luffy's soul, to his dream, to this whole era. That's waiting in the post-war arc, and I was not ready for how dark that gets. Pattern break. Imagining a world where Luffy saved Ace. But real quick, I want to do a little thought experiment because this is the thing that kept looping in my head after the credits rolled. What if Luffy actually saved Ace and they got out? Like, imagine Marineford with the same insane build, the same sky-splitting clashes, but the ending is different. Picture it, Luffy breaks the cuffs, Ace is free, they do that back-to-back stance, and instead of a magma fist, we get a clean escape. The Moby Dick remnants cover them, Law's submarine scoops them up, and they just vanish beneath the waves. Can you imagine how hyped that would feel in the moment? We'd all be screaming, crying, losing our minds, right? On a surface level, that version is so emotionally satisfying. Luffy pushes past every limit, the story rewards his stubbornness, and he wins the war that nothing could have prepared me to watch. Ace lives, the brothers laugh in the infirmary later, and we get that classic shonen, we made it somehow energy. As an emotionally crumpled man watching at 2 a.m., I would have eaten that up. But then I started asking, if that happened, does Luffy actually change? Like, really change? Does he wake up on that ship and go, I am terrifyingly weak? Or does he go, I pulled it off again, I just have to keep charging forward? In my opinion, without Ace's death, that brutal mirror never fully shatters. He'd still train, sure, but would he rethink his entire approach to protecting his friends or just double down on reckless faith? Because the Luffy we get after Marineford is a guy who breaks, who sees that even his insane willpower can't bend the world yet. This arc completely broke me down, partly because it breaks him down. If Ace lives, Does he ever send that message to his crew? Do we get a 2-year time skip born out of pure regret and fear of losing them again, or just a victory lap into the new world? And then there's the world. In this alternate cut, Whitebeard still dies. His declaration about the One Piece still shakes everything, but Ace survives as the son of Roger and the heir to Whitebeard's will. The world government doesn't just lose a war, they let the symbol they were trying to erase slip through their fingers. Can you imagine the propaganda spin on that? The balance of power would tilt in a crazy way. With all of that said, let's get into why I think Oda doesn't pick that route. That version hurts less, but it doesn't scar. It doesn't carve this deep, ugly wound into Luffy or the world. Marineford chooses the harder, more emotionally honest path. The rescue succeeds, and then reality still kills Ace. That is insane storytelling confidence, and it's exactly that cruelty that makes what comes next feel so necessary. Marineford as the bridge to the time skip. And that's where Marineford stops being just a tragic arc and starts being a turning point for the entire story. Because once Ace dies, once Whitebeard dies, once the war ends with that much blood on the ice, you look at Luffy and you look at this world and you go, how does he just keep sailing like normal after this? Nothing could have prepared me for how clearly Marineford, stacked on top of Sabaody and Impel Down, screams at you. These kids are out of their depth. Sabaody was already the warning shot, right? One admiral and a handful of pacifistas walk in, and the Straw Hats get erased. Not defeated, not pushed back, literally wiped off the map in an instant. Then, Impel Down shows Luffy clawing through hell itself and still barely scraping by. And Marineford is the payoff to that build. This is what the real board looks like. You've got admirals casually rewriting the environment, Yonko commanders dropping in, warlords treating this like a playground, and Luffy is just one rubber guy running on fumes. In my opinion, watching him pop gear second in front of people like Akainu and Mihawk is almost painful because you can feel how huge that gap is. He's impressive, he's inspiring, but he is not ready. Not for this scale. This war explodes the power hierarchy out in the open. The Yonko aren't rumors anymore. They're tectonic plates. The admirals aren't cool bosses, they're natural disasters with uniforms. Even the warlords, who we've been slowly meeting, suddenly feel like a sampler platter of different kinds of monsters. And then you remember, Luffy's dream is to stand at the very top of this ocean. That is insane. Watching Marineford, the idea that he could just keep grinding arc by arc with small, incremental growth starts to feel kind of fake. That's why, for me, the time skip stops feeling like a gimmick and starts feeling like the only believable next step after this catastrophic failure. This arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and left me as this emotionally crumpled man on my couch, but it also broke down the illusion that heart and luck are enough on their own. Luffy's will is ridiculous, but his body, his skills, his crew, they all need to catch up to the world he's charging into. And the crazy part is, Oda doesn't just hard cut to 2 years later. The post-war arc slows everything down and says, real quick, we have to sit in this. We have to watch Luffy actually process Ace's death, confront what he couldn't do, and make an active decision about his future instead of just drifting to the next island. With all of that said, let's get into that next stage, because the way Luffy heals from this, the way he rebuilds himself and his dream, completely redefines what it even means for him to become Pirate King. And that's exactly what I'll be diving into in the next video. What Marineford taught me about One Piece. Marineford is the arc that made me realize this isn't just Luffy wants to be Pirate King. Let's go on a fun boat trip. This is where the story grabs you by the throat and says, are you actually ready for what that dream costs? Because nothing could have prepared me for how hard this war hits once you step back from the explosions and really sit with it. When I think about Marineford now, it's not just the crazy spectacle, it's this brutal emotional chain. Luffy's desperate charge from the second he skydrops in, already half dead from Impel Down, screaming Ace's name like that's the only word left in his vocabulary. The way every step forward is bought with blood, favors, and literal years off his life. You feel his body breaking, his voice cracking, his mind fraying, and he just keeps going. How do you watch that and still call this a simple adventure story? And then, the reunion. That moment where Luffy finally reaches the platform, the key works, the shackles fall, and Ace is free. It feels like the universe finally gave this kid a win. For a second, I was actually relaxing in my chair like, okay, we did it, roll credits. But this arc completely broke me down, ripped me up, and spat me back out when it took that away. Ace's sacrifice isn't just sad, it's cruelly timed. He is literally walking away from death, and his pride, his anger at Akainu, that inherited will of, I will not run from who I am, drags him back. Whitebeard's death lands the same way. This man could have fled. Instead, he chooses to stand there, back full of wounds, chest untouched, announcing a new era for his sons. That single image reframes the whole world for me. The Marines and world government aren't just order. They are a machine that fears symbols, bloodlines, and hopes so much they'll wipe them out on live TV. In my opinion, Marineford is where One Piece stops flirting with themes like grief and trauma and just dives straight in. Real quick, this arc also changed how I feel about dreams in this world. Being Pirate King, finding the One Piece, carrying a D in your name, even just choosing a family like Whitebeard's crew. All of that comes with a cost. Loving anyone under a system this cruel means accepting that you might not get a happy ending with them. Is that worth it? Luffy thinks so, but you watch him collapse over Ace's body, mind completely shattered, and you realize the story is willing to make him pay that price. That's why, in my opinion, Marineford is the arc where One Piece fully earns its reputation. All that slow build, all those islands, all those laughs, cash out here in something this emotionally rich and devastating. And as the war smoke clears, the chaos finally quiets down into this numb, reflective silence. That's the space where Luffy has to decide what kind of man he's going to be next, which is exactly what I want to unpack as we move into the fallout and the way this series rebuilds him from the ground up. From Sabaody to Marineford, the road to breaking point. So when that numb silence settles over Marineford, you kind of have to zoom out and ask, how did we get here? How did this goofy rubber kid who was arguing about meat in East Blue end up screaming in a war between legends and gods? In my opinion, that's where the journey from Sabaody to Marineford hits like a truck, because real quick, go back to Sabaody. That arc is the first time the story just looks Luffy in the eyes and says, "You are not ready." Kuma doesn't beat the crew, he erases them, one by one. Luffy isn't outplayed in some clever strategy. He's on his knees, sobbing, literally begging for everyone's lives, and it still doesn't matter. That's the moment his fantasy of, if I try hard enough, I can protect everyone, just shatters. And we're only at the starting line of this spiral. Then we slam into Amazon Lily. On paper, it's funny, right? Luffy on a no-man island, but under the jokes, he's completely alone for the first time in the series. No crew, no ship, no plan. And the only reason he even moves again is because the Ace news hits. That transponder snail call where he finds out Ace is going to be executed, that's not just plot setup, that's the second crack. You can feel it. He doesn't even process his own trauma from Sabaody. He just sprints straight into the next disaster. Impelled down is where the desperation goes from, I have to save my brother, to, I will burn myself alive if that's what it takes. Every floor is Luffy trading pieces of himself away. His lifespan, his body, his allies, his innocence about what this world really is. He fails to stop Ace's transfer, gets poisoned to death, watches entire groups of people die or get left behind, and still keeps going. How insane is it that by the time he skydrops into Marineford, he's already spiritually wrecked? And that's his starting point for this war. All along this path, the same themes keep looping back like a nightmare. Luffy can't protect everyone. The world is way bigger and crueler than his optimism. Every time he thinks he's pushing his limit, the story just moves the goalpost. Nothing could have prepared me for how clearly that all funnels into Marineford until I watched it in order. This arc completely broke me down because it doesn't feel random. It feels like gravity. Marineford is the collision point. Sabaody's helplessness, Amazon Lily's isolation, Impel Down's sacrifice, Ace's execution, Whitebeard's era, the world government's justice. It all slams together here like it was always destined to. With all of that said, let's get into why the post-war arc, in my opinion, is the moment the story forces Luffy to actually look back on this whole road, accept what he lost, and somehow rebuild himself from the ashes. How do you come back from this? That's the question I want to answer next. Marineford in one sentence: love versus a cruel world. So when I zoom out from all the insanity, Marineford in one sentence feels like this. It's the story of one boy's love for his brother crashing full speed into a world that does not care about that love at all. Nothing could have prepared me for how loud that collision was. You feel it in every scream, every order, every sacrifice. It's love, versus a cruel world, and the world has home field advantage. Think about how every single faction is positioned. The world government doesn't see brothers, it sees symbols. Ace isn't a person, he's Gold D. Rogers' son, a threat that has to be erased on live TV. The Marines are literally weaponizing his death as propaganda. On the other side, Whitebeard doesn't see a political liability, he sees a son. His entire armada sails into hell not for territory, not for treasure, but for one man in chains. That's insane, right? The whole battlefield becomes this giant test. Do human bonds actually matter here, or is this all just political theater with bodies as props? Luffy is the purest version of that test. He does not care about the cameras, the titles, the justice banners. He's just running, bleeding, breaking himself for his brother. Meanwhile, Sengoku is calculating optics, the admirals are maintaining order, the warlords are flexing for their own agendas. Every decision either leans toward love or away from it. Even something like Scourge stabbing Whitebeard is love being twisted by the system into paranoia. In my opinion, that's what makes this arc feel so crazy and emotionally heavy while you're watching it. And yet, as much as this arc completely broke me down, it's not some cheesy love conquers all story. Love loses in the moment. Ace still dies, Luffy still collapses. Justice wins on paper. But look at the scars and legacies it leaves behind. Whitebeard's final declaration about the One Piece being real literally shakes the entire power structure. Ace's final words are not about Roger, not about the Pirate King, but about being happy he was loved. Luffy's scream over Ace's body is love refusing to go quietly, even when it's already lost. Like, that is insane for a Shonen War climax. Real quick, this is the lens that, for me, makes Marineford stick as we move into post-war and the time skip. If you remember it as just the big war arc, you miss the point. If you remember it as the day love got crushed but refused to shut up, suddenly everything after hits different. How does a guy who's been shattered by that kind of loss rebuild? How does a world that just watched Whitebeard's declaration pretend nothing changed? With all of that said, let's get into how post-war takes those screams, those scars, and forces Luffy to actually live with them. What's next? Post-war, grief, and rebuilding Luffy. Post-war is the part of the story where the noise finally stops, and you're just left alone with the ringing. Marineford is chaos, it's screaming, it's everyone clashing on this insane battlefield. But post-war is when the camera zooms all the way in on one broken kid who just lost his brother. Nothing could have prepared me for how quiet that feels. Because as brutal as it was watching Ace die here, we never really stop, right? We go straight from that gut punch into Whitebeard, into Blackbeard, into Shanks, into the world reacting. Luffy doesn't get to sit down, breathe, and say, Ace is gone. In post-war, he finally does. And the crazy part is, that's when it hurt me the most. Where do I even begin with teasing this without spoiling it? There's this moment, right at the start, when Luffy wakes up. For a second, he's just Luffy again, confused, bandaged, kind of doing the normal anime where am I thing. And then the memories hit. That realization, that instant when he remembers Ace on the platform, the hole in his chest, the way Ace smiled and thanked him. Like, that is insane. You feel his brain trying to reject reality in real time. And it's not just about watching Luffy scream or collapse. Even though, yes, this arc completely broke me down as an emotionally crumpled man on my couch. It's about who's there with him. The people around him don't just patch up his body, they have to decide how to respond to a grief this big. Do you tell him everything? Do you hold things back? Do you let him break? In my opinion, some of the most human moments in One Piece so far are just characters sitting with Luffy while he falls apart. Real quick, that's the angle I want to take in the next video. Less who punched who, and way more, what does trauma actually do to this kid who's been smiling since episode 1? We're going to talk about how post-war digs into healing, into failure, and into the one decision Luffy makes that completely changes the trajectory of the story. The choice that leads to the 2-year time skip and the Straw Hats reunion. How do you go from, I couldn't save my brother, to, I'm still going to be strong enough for my crew? And once we've lived through Marineford and post-war together, I really appreciate that we'll finally be able to zoom out and do a full Paramount War Saga retrospective. With all of that said, let's get into the question I want you thinking about until that next video drops. After losing Ace, what does it even mean for Luffy to still want to be Pirate King? If Marineford broke you too, stick around, because that's the thing, right? After everything we just watched, after that hug, that smile, that punch through Ace's chest, what does Pirate King even mean to a kid who just watched his brother die in his arms? Nothing could have prepared me for how heavy that question would feel after Marineford. We started this video in pure shock, just thrown into the chaos of the war, watching Luffy literally fall from the sky, already half dead from Impel Down. Then, we crawled our way to that insane reunion, that one moment where it felt like the whole 500 episode build was worth it. Only for this arc to completely break me down again when Ace turns back, opens his mouth, and loses everything. And on top of that, we had to sit with Whitebeard's final stand, the so-called justice of the Marines, and the idea that the world might actually be built on a lie. If you're still here watching and you feel drained or angry or just empty in that weird way where you can't even cry anymore, you're not alone. I feel it too. This arc didn't just hit me emotionally, it made me question the entire story I thought I was watching. Is this really the same goofy adventure where Luffy rings a bell and punches a god? Or did we just cross into tragedy territory and nobody warned me properly? That is insane. So real quick, if Marineford broke you too, I want this channel to be the place where we can actually process that together. Drop a comment telling me where it hit you the hardest. Was it Ace smiling and thanking Luffy for loving him? Was it Luffy's scream when he realizes he failed? Was it Whitebeard dying on his feet, refusing to fall just so his sons could have a future? I'm going to be down there reading everything, probably as an emotionally crumpled man, but I really appreciate knowing I'm not the only one feeling this. If you want more space to talk about this kind of stuff, to unpack the crazy world building and the trauma and not just the hype fights, hit like so I know to keep doing deep dives like this, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Cause we're not done. Post-war is coming, and in my opinion, that's where we really see the impact of this arc on Luffy's mind, on the Straw Hats being scattered, on what it actually means to get back up after a loss like this. And then after that, we're doing that full Paramount War Saga retrospective, zooming out on everything from Ace's reveal as Roger's son to Shanks walking in and ending the war like it's nothing. This channel is basically becoming my long-term Marineford recovery group, so if you're sitting there wondering how Luffy can ever smile again, stick around. His story isn't over. Ours with this series isn't over, and I need to see, with all of you, how he rises from this.